The girl questions a boy about why he bought them, while her friend says she wants someone to really say what he wants from them. Nervously, he thinks the reason for buying slaves is obvious. Then he replies that he wants to rid the world of hunger. However, in his mind, he understands the motives are purely carnal. He comments that a pure and white space he saw beforehand was the smile of a beauty far superior to any human being. It was an encounter with a goddess, meaning he is dead. And in those lessons, he learned the basics of all web novels. It's about transmigration to another world, which will certainly have an unimaginable pattern, and then he will live the life of the hero in another world. It thinks that, after 30 years of a solitary life beside his trusted partner, he will bring happiness to goddess. Suddenly, someone calls him. Smiling sweetly, the goddess insults him, calling him an idiot, unpopular, and unable to hold a good conversation with women, ending by calling him Mr. Virgin. Annoying, the protagonist understands that he cannot contest this information. However, thanks to his younger sister, he learned to withstand verbal abuse. In shock, he asks the woman who she is. She replies by saying she is the one who mortals call a goddess. At that moment, the hero receives the information that he is dead. Then curious, he asks how he died. She explains that a student fell from the building onto him, causing his death. Blushing, the goddess comments that he felt all the delicacy of the girl's body and starts laughing. Upon hearing this, the boy imagines the scene and thinks he does not deny the desire to have this physical contact. But at that moment, he didn't even feel the softness, as it was fatal. Curious to guess about the girl who fell, wanting to know if she's okay or not. The goddess tells him not to worry and responds that she was saved thanks to the boy's efforts. Then he feels relieved. She explains that he saved a life and therefore will be rewarded for his good deed. At this moment, she says she will grant him a special opportunity for his next life. The goddess explains that he will reincarnate in a fantasy world of swords and magic. However, he will possess a person. She explains that in the realm of goddesses, there is a flow of reincarnations. However, there is a shortage of vessels who ensure the job gets done. She selects and acquires the vessels in advance, which are the bodies of the natives. She explains that he will be a young man named Allan, and the protagonist thinks he has a very cute face. Excited, he comments that it's an excellent body with good compatibility with an older Winnie-sama, and that current relationships are guaranteed. Smiling, the goddess says she's ready to fulfill the boy's wish and transform him into a young virgin. Seeing this, he thinks this goddess alone is foolish because she plays too easily while breathing. With a sadistic look, she asks if the boy wants to die. Annoyed, he says he didn't say anything and that she should stop reading his thoughts. The boy asked about the possession, questioning if she will merge with Allan's previous personality and if they will be together with two minds sharing the same body. Denying it, she explains that unfortunately his personality will cease to exist. As an inexperienced adventurer raised in an orphanage, he will soon lose his life and dungeon. She says that when his soul departs, the protagonist will take control of the body. Reality. Realizing something. The hero asks if Allan will die in the dungeon, or if he will end up as monster food in the dungeon, as he doesn't want to possess a zombie's body. But the goddess comments that it's because of this that she is granting the privilege of a transmigrator, her. She reveals that what she will grant him will be the ability of regeneration. Surprise, the boy wonders if it's that thing that helps recover from injuries and body damage. She asked if he understands now, and says it is set to activate the moment the boy's soul possesses Allan's body. At the moment Allan dies, the young hero's personality and soul will be injected, and then the injuries that led to his death will be healed. You wonder if this death avoidance trick goes completely against the rules because it's something SSS level basically free. He gets very excited, imagining that his life will be filled with carnal relationships with women. And then the goddess explains that this concludes the explanation and asks if he has any more questions but warns that he is ready. Then he wonders if there's any reason to back out when a glorious future awaits him. At that moment, everything around him begins to shine. He tells everyone to watch as he becomes the king of the harem. Back to the present. There was a time when the protagonist thought this way. His name is Allan, formerly known as Hyorogari Doshin. Ben. He says that 3 years have passed since he began living in this world with swords and magic. However, he is very close to setting a new record in his virginity. With his head down and crying, he wonders if this is a joke or a nightmare, and that there were also some absurd miscalculations. The first of these is that exterminating monsters is extremely difficult. They usually can't win. The second is that he can't wear magic by leveling up. The possibility of doing something amazing really brings pain, and his only advantage is using the regeneration ability. It is powerful, with fast activation and low mana consumption. However, the third miscalculation is that pain receptors cannot be cut off. No one would wish to have such an incompetent body, and in this way, he would be completely alone, because the fourth mistake is the lack of a group's information. Understand that his only salvation is not being able to use regeneration in front of others, and it's not that he can't use this ability. It's a power granted by a goddess. The healing ability can help heal oneself and is considered a miraculous art, or at least that's what the church says. The fifth error is that the church has full authority, being an organization that has accumulated much wealth, authority, and lust, and it can easily take political power from the empire. Then think that giving up because of all this isn't his style, and that if it were anyone else without his vision, they would truly have lost. After walking for some time, he finally reaches his destination, being a slave merchant. He says that having to go from 85, he had a brilliant idea. Think that if he can't find companions for his adventure, it's because he doesn't live his life at his own pace. Understand that having a slave can give you any order, even if it's improper, which besides all this, can also control his brain as a symbol to keep his regeneration a secret. Think that it's an infallible plan, and this is where his time in another world begins. Upon entering the place, the man gives a good suggestion to the boy and asks what class of slave he desires. Responding, he says to show all auctions. After showing everything, the merchant comments that it was the last one and asks if something caught the young client's attention. The boy gets nervous and thinks it's very expensive, but then decides to show his intelligence and go in the offensive. Looking back, he asks the merchant if there are others, which leaves him in shock. Thinking, he realizes he was bluffing and wonders if it worked. That not loud, he says it's worrying, and then he asks to show everything. The merchant invites the boy to enter, and the protagonist thinks it's an unpleasant place and wonders if the merchant keeps people there. Suddenly, he sees two girls who are being held captive and with many injuries. They look back at the boy with a dead and somber look, which leaves him completely frightened and in shock. Curious, he asks who they are. Answering, he says those with my ears are an ancient elf, a superior race of elves, and the other is an old dwarf, and both are rare species. Continuing, the man says that they would normally be classed as slaves. At that moment, interrupting the boy asks how much it would be, stating that he'll take these two with him. The merchant wonders if you should do it, but then decides to sell them as they're no longer useful and have been here for a long time. Sometime later, the boy is pulling a cart with the two slaves he just bought. Stopping, he asks what they thought and apologizes. He comments that up until now they have suffered a lot, and then uses his regeneration ability. He understands that he can finally show the true value of this ability, healing both the hands that were cut and the eyes as well. Thus, they were regenerated and returned to how they were born. Seeing this scene, the boy is in shock, wondering what is happening. One of the girls is completely surprised and nervous, saying that it can't be and that their bodies and eyes are finally normal. Her colleague looks at her hand and wonders how this is possible, because it was cut just a moment ago. Seeing all this, the protagonist starts to get nervous and then decides to wait a bit and think carefully. He wonders who these girls are and that you really want to have beautiful slaves, but you didn't expect them to be so stunning. And then at that moment, one of them calls out to him, asking his name. From Bling, he replies that his name is Allan, and at that moment, he spectacularly bites his tongue. He tells himself to stay calm and that this is an unexpected gift. He's happy because his harem in another world is really happening. This time, he used his cheat ability to restore the slaves he had bought, who ended up being two beautiful girls. So if you finally fulfill the promise he made to himself when he reincarnated in this world, looking at a flower, he wonders if this is what one would normally think. Upon buying the two burls, he spent his last savings down to the last coin. So he didn't even have money for an inn, and is forced to live almost out in the open and monastery deep in the mountains. The goddess appears, commenting that a lack of planning is a terrible thing. Then the hero responds that just because she's a goddess, she can't invade people's internal monologues. Either way, he understands that there are many things he didn't foresee happening. Now, if you'd love to hear those words from the two girls who's healthy, restored, and saved. Because anyway, he is still updating his record of maintaining his virginity. One of the slaves is an ancient elf named Sylphie, and the other is an old dwarf named Noel, who are apparently rare races in this world. However, apart from details like names, species, and species rarity, beyond that, everything about them is just a mystery. Reading the letter, he gets nervous because he tries but can't read or write in this world's script, and is sure that there are many important things written on the assessment scroll. Suddenly, one of the girls asks what he's doing now. It's actually Elf Sylphie, who leaves him completely embarrassed. Very nervous, he replies that he wanted to grow yams, and then asks if she likes that type of food. Curious, she asked if he's really going to grow them. Then in his mind, he thinks there's no way she won't eat yams grown by this virgin godfather. Her. Changing the subject completely, asks if she's taking a walk, which confuses her. In his mind, he tries to understand that he can't let them sleep outdoors or go hungry until the yams are ready to be harvested for them to eat. So he sets up some kind of picnic and meal. He thinks that if they get a little meat, he's sure they'll be great for hugging. Instead, he offers some food to Noel, saying it's very tasty. Without any reaction, the girl thanks him. Then he thinks that the two were still quite cautious. Sometimes, later alone, he complains that in this situation, he can't invite them for carnal relations. Then he understands that at this moment he needs to work. So he tells the two that he's going to the city and that they should wait for him. Looking back, he asked if they want anything specific to eat after he buys things on his return, but both reply that they don't want anything in particular. As he walks away, he thinks he doesn't even know what they like to eat, and that even his plan to attract them with food has turned to smoke. Sulph is in shock because he actually left the two slaves alone. She realizes that both she and Noel have already regained their original powers, and that even though they have slave operations, it's not that difficult to escape control. She wonders if he's testing their loyalty and doesn't understand what's happening. She has already regained her original powers like her ancient grandfather, and should know, reading the assessment scroll, that she's advanced tree magic, which can help cultivate plants. With this ability, she can make them sprout and bear fruit immediately, and that at this moment he only needs to give an order, not needing to work alone. Confused, she thinks she doesn't know his goal, but is grateful to have her body restored. She understands that there's no sign the boy wants their bodies to fulfill his ambitions. Wonder if he'll do anything once he has their trust. To confirm her suspicions, she follows the boy. Looking through the windows, she asks if this is a clinic, and if it's his job, then seeing him healing a girl, she wonders why he doesn't use restoration, because if he did, the church would keep an eye on him, and in this way the boy could have any position and all the honors he wants. Little girl heal, thanks, Allan. Then the elf starts to focus again, and it looks like the treatment is complete. Allan just smiles at the little girl, telling her to take care of herself, which makes the elf very curious, wondering what's going on with him because he pretends to be a good person, even though he's someone who buys slaves. And yet he still doesn't want anything from the slaves he possesses. Extremely confused, she wonders what exactly this Allan thinks in the end. After that, about 3 months pass. Asks Allan why he isn't using magic to make the plants grow. Not knowing anything, he wonders if she wants to work as a farmer, and that thanks to restoration, she can recover her existence and work alone without any issues. In response, he says he's happy with her consideration. Then she comments that with the tree seed, she can harvest crops immediately. Then she asks if he knows that. Demonstrating, she makes one of the crops grow quickly in a few seconds. This leaves him completely surprised. Observing such powerful magic, he doesn't understand what's happening. In shock, he asks what this is and what this ability is about, realizing that Self has hidden this power from him all this time. However, she says he should know about it, because it was very likely written on her assessment scroll. At that moment, he wonders if he should tell him the truth, because he said that he's like a baby who can't read or write, but he can't just proclaim that their master is a baby, because it's too embarrassing for him to be your master, and a man has to appear capable before a girl. So he decides to lie to the two of them, him understanding that he'll immediately be labeled as the productive yam diamond, that for some reason continues to cultivate yams that can be grown in just a second. Feeling nervous, he tells himself to calm down and that you must be careful not to be called a pervert, to keep his worth downplayed if possible. He needs to find an excuse that raises his standing in their eyes. Magic is a two-sided coin. Depending on the user, it can turn into poison or medicine. He comments that that's why he doesn't force others to use magic, and that when the time comes when they want to help, he would like them to consider using magic voluntarily as something important. Moreover, he explains that he can do anything. It's the most binding thing in the world when people think this way. After saying this, the boy gets nervous again, questioning who he is to say such things. He comments that there's no need to force him to use it. Then he picks up the crop and thinks he's very embarrassed at this moment. From Saul's perspective, the elf doesn't understand anything and just remains silent. She understands that even if he pretends to be a good person and keeps disguising himself, his eyes will show his true feelings. Analyzing the situation, she realizes that his expression has changed. But it looked like his heart had a deep, open wound, and his words sounded as if he was trying to convince himself of something that isn't true. She thinks she's sure it's not a lie, and that he experienced the same thing. Losing himself in his power exploration in the past, he thought he could do all kinds of things. But then something happened and completely changed his view on it. And because of this, he's hiding from his own power. The girl thinks that by displaying this magic and trying to deceive people, she feels very ashamed of herself. At this moment, she calls Manuel's attention in her direction. She asks if she can have a minute, because she wants to talk about the future. Upon arriving home, Allan is completely shocked and even drops his basket. He realizes there are various things that have been planted and wonders what this is. He understands that this is certainly an annoyance, and that he, not reincarnated, is being overshadowed by a cheap ability to plant, noticing the hero's presence. The good-hearted elf comments that she is welcoming him. Then the boy asks why she used magic. Feigning innocence, she asked if she was too hasty in doing so, and even if she used it, it was by her own will. The boy remembers that that's what he said yesterday. Then he wonders if she's trying to criticize him. He thinks that this was his perfect plan to use modern knowledge to be unparalleled. The elf, in turn, thinks that he doesn't even use his power, and that he wants to make her eat only yams. The boy then thanks her and comments that she doesn't need to force herself into anything. He thinks this was his moment to shine. But suddenly, he changes his expression, saying he still has something to show. Sometime later, he decides to invent concrete that doesn't exist in this world with sturdy buildings. He can improve the population's living conditions, and if he does this, he'll both see it as a better way. No one will then ask what he's doing, in comments that she smells him doing things, and that you should let her participate. The boy is impressed by this first positive interaction from her, and he comments that it's all good. Then the girl asks what he wants to do. He mentions he wants to build a new concrete house, and as she approaches, the girl asks what concrete is. He replies that he used water, sand, and gravel to harden the cement. But interrupting, she says she also doesn't know what cement is. So the boy carefully explains what cement is to her. Noel then asks what comes after that, and the protagonist says he'll teach her. After a while, he manages to teach her. Then Noel tells her to sit and watch. Suddenly, she uses some kind of magic called extraction. The hero realizes she managed to gather the raw materials in the blink of an eye, and that this will end up overshadowing his contributions. He realizes that both she and the elf also have cheat abilities. While he was despairing, the cement production was complete. Then Noher comments that she needs the elf's help here. He knows that recently the two have started talking more and more together. Noelle tells her friend that this man really knows nothing about economics, and she says they should forget the useless pay and handle things themselves. Sometimes, later in town, the hero wonders what he should do here. No, it ends up as the manufacturing master, while Sylphie becomes the plant master. Observing them, he wonders why things turned out like this, because he was supposed to be reincarnated with a cheat ability to be strong and flirt with girls. However, at this moment, Allan doesn't know one thing. He doesn't know that from the moment he bought them, he'll be adored as a demon king in an alarming way. According to the future, he'll be considered a threat by a hero and experience a life full of ups and downs. No thinks that what Allan said was interesting, and that her dwarf instincts were screaming. This was the first time she was experiencing this kind of thing. And by doing exactly as the protagonist suggested, it brought results and it was amazing. She understands that Allan is not just some simple nobody and that not being vain with the knowledge he has to share, everything about this boy is great. She thinks that everything you taught her made her so happy. Besides her, Sulf also commented that it seems like they both can place their trust in Allan. Noah also agrees that they can do this. She understands that she wants to carry Allan's burdens on her shoulders. Sometime later, the protagonist wakes up. As he gets up, he finds 2 more monasteries and wonders what this means. Suddenly, Noel appears, startling him. She explains that she got 3 for each of them, and observing her response, the boy understands what she's doing with this. This shocked us so much indifference. Seeing Anastasia approaching, he says she's very close and cute and looks like a doll. At this moment, the girl says that she worked hard for the 3 of them. Making a cute face, she asked him to praise her gently. Appearing out of nowhere, the elf asks Allan why he simply doesn't compliment her obliquely. Suddenly, the protagonist begins to reflect and says he now understands that the 2 were teaming up against him. Stofie says that a talk show is open for a conversation between 2 beautiful slaves. She says Allan has no money, talent, and is only received with exploration abilities. That her friend says he's not a totally competent person. Noah comments that, besides all that, he's also a filthy otaku and skinny on top of it, and Sylphie says he's a total virgin. Living with him in the same building is very dangerous, so she'd be happy to have a separate living area. Know all the comments that she'll quickly build other houses. The elf thanks her and comments that if her friend prepares a place for this pig too, he won't complain. Noah then comments that he should be grateful for both of their kindness. This was the protagonist's imagination. Then confused, Sylphie asks what's wrong. Now, nervously, he thinks he's come this far, and there's no turning back now since from their perspective, he's in a position to compliment Noel. At that moment, she stares, thinking she has permission to have her head petted. Because they needed to get here, she asked not to look like a pervert. Petting her head, he thanks her. Receiving this gratitude and also the head pat, the girl stays silent but smiles. In shock, the protagonist thinks his heart is being purified. Then the elf wonders if he's not talking about her in comments that she's jealous. The boy understands that Noel was healing, so he doesn't push her away in seeing this scene. Sylphie is surprised they are so close. At that moment, she asked herself to stay calm, commenting that she's of the most noble species, being the ancient elf, and that she won't be jealous of a mere head pat. He understands that starting tomorrow, he'll increase the number of crop harvests, affirming that he certainly has no ulterior motives and that he already considers her indispensable anyway. In this way, a few more months pass. Observing the protagonist, the elf remarks that as always, he's tending the field alone, as if he's forgotten about the magic both of them have. She explains that magic has 5 basic attributes divided into fire, water, wind, metal, and earth. The elf has an evolved attribute and an aptitude for plants, while Noel's aptitude is for fire and metal, as well as being skilled in the earth attribute, and this compatibility is beyond comparison, extending to both food and housing. They both use their magic only when they want to, and not once has Allan forced them to use it against their will. She understands that he isn't blinded by desires and doesn't like conflicts, seeing him as if he were hermit. Although he has an obsession with yams, he's a complete person. The elf understands that she's certain there are things the boy wants to do. She decides to know who he really is and what his true feelings are, wondering if he's not truly alone and if that's not the case, and if there's no need to specifically choose rare species. Approaching Allan, she says she wants to hear it from him and directly asks why he bought the 2 of them. She asks him to share his real objective. Nervous, the boy thinks about telling the truth, which consists of having karma relations with the 2 of them and nothing more. However, he realizes he doesn't like to say that, and Noel appears, saying she's also interested in this matter. She explains that being a rare species, their values are priceless, and that the only uses them to compensate for needs around him. So she asks if there's nothing he wants to do. The boy replies that his needs consist of abundant food, richly furnished housing, and asks if they're joking with him. The boy asserts that he's already being provided for and asks why he's trying to give more food for free. They question why he isn't taking advantage of their potential. Crying responds that otherwise he'd be even more pathetic. He thinks that the 2 have already provided food in a house, and then he wonders why he should take advantage of their potential. He understands that if they want to stop and lick his feet, he has no choice but to obey, but he'd be very happy to do so. Observing the 2, he wonders how he should escape the situation. At that moment, the elf displays her rare tree magic, while Noel shows her high-speed refining magic. Observing this, the protagonist realizes that the 2 are trying to completely destroy his self-esteem. The protagonist understands that if that's their intention, he will do exactly as they asked. Gain courage, you think so. Speak directly with all sincerity about what he wants to do with him. In his mind, he thinks he wants to have carnal relations, but he responds that he wants to start freeing the world from hunger. Trigger. This response leaves both of them surprised and blushing. The sincere version of the hero in his troubled mind was completely annoyed by this answer. He wonders if he's running away, calling himself a coward, and that if he weren't the oldest son, he would have died from self-loathing right there. So if he begins to reflect on this response from the protagonist regarding freeing the world from hunger, and that this is an ideal worthy of a god, and analyzing everything he has done, it starts to make sense. She realizes that the yami he's holding as a treasure is quite an effective plant that can be cultivated in wastelands, thus again people from hunger longer. She also wonders if the clouded expression he sometimes wears on his face is for the sake of the distant ideal he envisioned for himself. After hearing this surprising answer, they both look at each other. They understand that their master has in his heart an ideal far beyond what they could imagine or expect. They all think she's still not fully trusting him. However, she approaches the boy with a smile on her face. She says she wants to follow him by his side to see what kind of world he wishes to create, and that if that's his goal, they need to cultivate the land. And seeing this, the boy is extremely confused and agrees. However, he only understands that dude is made-up excuse at the moment. His heroic tale in another world has taken its first step forward. In the world, there are only two types of people, being the losers and the winners, and those who lead and those who follow, along with those who exploit and those who are exploited. Then in a school, someone comments to trade green peas for their crab. The protagonist says that's his favorite. The girl replies that this type of trade is unfair. Smiling, she says she's still growing. Approaching her, the hero says he won't show mercy to his little sister. The boy wonders if his little sister from his past life, Mizuki-chan, is okay, and realizes that after all, reincarnating wasn't so regrettable. He notices that his mind wandered back to the past to escape reality and got completely lost and fought. Then the elf tells him he should cultivate the land to rid the world of hunger. Smiling, the protagonist says she's right. Right. Allan thinks that an intellectual beauty like Sulf should at least be vaguely aware of his secondary motives. He wonders if she intends to feign ignorance and believe these lies. He thinks that in this case, he'll be dancing in the palm of her hand, and that this is a prelude to the end of his life in another world. But you believe he can still fight, and that he has a lot of modern knowledge up his sleeve since things have come to this. He'll take revenge using his modern knowledge. Changing the subject, he suggests they make fertilizers. He explains that it's something that will supplement the soil nutrients used for plant growth, and that in this way, they'll be able to cultivate things on barren land, thanks to Sophie's magic, and that it will be challenging to attempt this long term. Curious, the elf comments that if they had something like this, they could use less mana, and besides that, they should think about improving flavor. At that moment, the protagonist mentions that there's also something called crop rotation. He says they should feed cattle on poor soil and on fertile soil plant wheat. He explains that by creating pasture for the cattle, they'll increase their numbers, and in turn the cattle eating the pasture will create manure for the soil, making it a perfect cycle. When Dudu says that women should make peace and hoes to expand the land for crop growth, seeing the elf, he realizes she's out lost for words. But then she starts crying, thinking there's no woman in the world who likes a vain, arrogant, and stupid man like him. At that moment, Noel approaches, excited. She gently asks him to explain the details and that she wants to start immediately. Nervous, the boy thinks that at this rate his moment to shine will be stolen and that his loss will be someone else's gain. He responds that it would be better for him to do it himself. However, the elf calls the boy's attention, calling him by his name and commenting that throwing a tantrum here isn't cool. Approaching the man smiles. Then he wonders why she thinks he's a spoiled child. Noel grabs the boy's arm, asking for details on the fertilizer first, and demands an explanation. Then he starts to smile. Beginning to explain, he says that the three most important nutrients that plants need are nitrogen, potassium, and phosphoric acid. He says they should first buy fish scraps and meat and bone meal, then use the elves and Sylphie's magic to mix the canola and soybean oils together with his super modern knowledge. He's gaining a lot of time. After hearing all this, Noel comments that it really sounds interesting, and the boy thinks it sounds like a quote from a mystery TV show. She mentions that she'll start immediately, and sometime later the protagonist asks if they're having yummy soup today. Noel appears, commenting that she has something to show the elf before lunch, and Sylphie says she was just about to call her, and a comment that she's already made peace and hose. While mixing the fertilizers, she tried to adjust the proportions and made some too, which surprises them both. While writing the proportions, she comments that due to Garlic's reaction, the quantity used varies, and that she should just experiment and make adjustments. Finishing, she says that with this, the protagonist's work will be easier. At that moment, the boy begins to reflect and realizes that Noel is responsible for manufacturing. The elf is responsible for cultivation. He wonders where that leaves him, being responsible for complaining and record-keeping. He realizes that strange jobs are falling on him, but he thinks that this isn't a rule reserved for a reincarnated person in another world with a cheat support ability. He understands that they stole his shine once again and dumped the tasks on him. He thinks he's being exploited and that they can't do this to him. After all, he's the master. At that moment, the elf begins to smile. She thinks it didn't happen again and that she's just showing her appreciation to Noel. Well, intervening, he calls the two and asks if they can leave the cultivation for later and have lunch first. Analyzing the boy's entire situation, she understands that he's a very curious person and that his desire to rid the world of hunger is something to admire. But with his strength, she doesn't really feel that this is possible. Upon hearing about the fertilizer and something called crop rotation, she was left speechless. At that moment, she starts to recall the idea of dividing the soil into 4 types. But with people like this, they could be fed with less demanding work. so she understands a revolutionary idea. But what impresses her is the vast amount of knowledge she has to think of this. Because for a long time, he alone continued his frantic struggle to turn his ideal into something real. She thinks the reason he bought her is because an ancient elf can freely control tree magic, which stimulates plant growth. And that even so, he neither forces her to work nor commands her with the slave crest. Smiling, she thinks respecting the independence of the slave is very commendable. And she says out loud that this person is really interesting. Interesting! Curious, the boy asks if Sylphie said something, and she replies it's nothing, and asks if the two of them would like more soup. Sometime later, Allan is ready for work. Using the hole, he remembers that it was made by Noel, and that's very easy to use. And that, even though many things haven't gone as he wanted, he's certain it's a way to end the path of ease where he gets everything he wants with his ability. His regeneration ability is a huge and powerful cheat. One that can resurrect, and if used well, it can even dig fertile soil to the surface. It thinks that surely Sylphie and Noel will praise him for the well-done work he's doing now. The boy is really dedicated. Working hard, he says he wants to be liked and appreciated, so his battle continues late into the night. Noel recalls that cultivation is done with restoration, and it's incredible. Watching the protagonist, she sees that he is truly working toward eliminating hunger. Which for that reason she bought the mantra servant. But it's impressive that he trusts the two of them so wisely without reservations, and that it could be so easy to use them for selfish reasons. She wonders if he thinks he won't be betrayed, and she understands that's not all after all. Allan has never given them an order. However, she realizes that what the protagonist wants is to walk alongside them toward a distant future when his ideal is realized, and that the wisdom they receive as a result of his efforts is proof of the trust he has in the two of them. On top of all that, she notes he's a responsible person who's always attentive to their needs. At this moment, Noel swears by the name of the ancient dwarves that she will support him. Looking to the side, she understands that Self probably feels the same, and the elf comments that Allan is simply amazing. Noel agrees, saying he's very cool and needs to give his all. Smiling, Self says she's right, and that she also needs to do the same. For there is no doubt that Allan wants them to take actions of their own will, and that they must do everything within their power. Thus, to make his ideals a reality, at that moment the two slaves confirm their intentions. Suddenly, the goddess appears, saying it's pathetic and funny after doing such useless tasks, and the boy asks if she could stop showing up so regularly. Changing the subject, he asks the woman if all goddesses are like her. Laughing, the woman says maybe he's the reason for that. The boy thinks about self-magic and how she has her own balance, and because of this, it's not efficient to mess everything up at once, and that Noel is working in her workshop. At that moment, he begins fantasizing about various romantic situations with the two, and you really want to see that in reality. Suddenly, he notices something very strange. He realizes that if he has nothing to do, he wonders why he doesn't invent something. Approaching Nana calls for Noel, asking if she's free now and saying he has a favor to ask. He explains that if she's busy, he can come back later. But the girl says she doesn't mind. Showing a piece of paper, she says she has something for her to do. In his mind, he thinks she's very close and that her arm is very soft. Then he wonders if she's so immersed in the project that she forgot he was there. Breaking the silence, Noah comments that there are no sizes listed. Then the boy says he for back to include them. It asks if she can make it in a size suitable for placing on a table. The girl says she understands, and that making it is easy and not a problem at all. Turning to the hero, she then questions the reason he wants it. Nervous, he starts to respond saying that this is something he needs. Happy, he thinks that these games will be very fun, and that when they play and enjoy them together, he'll certainly find more topics to talk about. At that, the girl says she understands, and will start working on this project immediately. In this case, could Allan become the one who explores the other? Or not. Self understands that Allan and Noel are doing something in the workshop. Waiting for the two, she hears the word review and thinks it's the first time she's hearing such words. The boy comments that it would be better to say they're going to play with it instead of use it, as they are items for leisure. And hearing this, the elf realizes it's a matter of recreation. Then she questions the reason for it, as Allan's goal is to rid the world of hunger, and there's no time for games. She understands that she needs to ask him for details. Approaching the elf, asks if she can join the two. Answering, Allan says yes. Sulfin understands that as she thought there was some hidden meaning within him. That youthful appearance of a love-struck young man, the impression Allan usually gives, is all fake. Because the real Allan has obtained great power through endless simulations and suffering. He has the wisdom and the ability to deceive others. Determined, she thinks she should become a strength for his cause and dive into it. At that moment, the elf begins to explain the game reversely, where the pieces are divided into black and white, and that if they fall in a certain way, the person loses. Seeing this game, the elf questions what it is and comments that it's all so interesting. She thinks that the rules can be understood by anyone with strategic variety, with a great deal of freedom, and that there could come a future where both children and adults will be attracted to this game, thus making it a goldmine. At this moment, he suggests they make a bet instead of playing just for fun, and that the winner can give any order they want to the loser. Then he asks what she thinks. Nervous, she thinks it's her opportunity for slaves to give an order, and she thinks Allan wants to see if they understand or not. The alpha sure isn't just looking for simple fun while playing, and that this is somehow related to the goal of eliminating hunger. She wonders if she should refuse the bet to show her understanding, or she needs to show her competence through actions. Call in her name. The dwarf comments that they both need to do their best. Then the elf agrees with her companion. Noelle then accepts the proposal and says that this way it will be more fun. Done, because they will do their best to meet his expectations. The negotiation is complete, and now they're going to play the game of reverse. At this moment, the elf understands that Allan is the inventor of the game and knows everything about it, and she doesn't see how they could win. But at that moment, she notices something very strange. Analyzing the game, she understands that it's a more limited move than she could imagine, and that, moreover, all moves remain in sequence, and that this makes it all even more difficult, because you can imagine that he would create such an uncomfortable situation for himself. Crying, the protagonist admits he lost. In shock, the elf questions if this could be a defeat that he had incorporated into his plan in advance. So, from the beginning, Allan didn't even plan to win. And now she sees that these matches are simply pretexts to give orders to the master. Being these creations of games of goldmine, that the current financial situation doesn't allow for simple games. She understands that in the end, this is a task for them to obtain funds for his cause. And then the order they need to make is as follows. Sometimes later they say it's a total victory, and his promise that will give an order. Selfie comments that she would like him to register in the Merchant Guild, and Noelle says she wants to have the property rights to this creation game. The two wonder if this is the answer the protagonist expected. Relieved, Galt is very happy, because you already imagined that they would want to be free from slavery. He had thought that rookies like them wouldn't be easy to beat because he was a veteran in this game. And no matter how he looks at it, he's completely defeated, and then he thanks them truly. Seeing Sylphie registering at the Merchants Guild, Galt is completely happy. The same goes as he sees Noel registering at the Alchemists Guild. He realizes that the fact that both still want to remain his slaves means they don't actually hate him. Galt comments that since they are in the Imperial capital, they should do some shopping. Stolfi thinks that it seems like they were having fun, and she wonders if they passed the test successfully. She understands that this is not the end, and that the next question is how to use this, and that even if just a little, she got closer to him realizing this closeness. She feels extremely happy. 2 weeks then pass since Sylphie, Noel, and their expectations were registered at the guild. Meanwhile, Allan is currently obsessed with sugar. Sylphie, and you're going to play without a rook, bishop, silver general, knights, or lance. And they try to agree on the game in the easiest skill level, with no time restrictions, the movement where he can return a piece after moving it. Sophie says it's a good warm-up exercise for her mind, and always directs your comments that he is weak. Back, she explains that it was a great way to relieve stress and thanks him. Then the boy, crying, says he didn't take it seriously even once for her to know. Interrupting them both, Noel arrives, saying they are leaving soon, and she tells the protagonist that they are going to the capital again today. They will be back by dinner. The boy's lady bids them farewell, wishing them a good trip. However, as they leave, he lies on the bed thinking he still has plans with his modern knowledge, that he's going to make a direct trip to the path of a carnal relationship. He thinks about the strategy of putting alcohol in their drinks, and that a burning body and reason will loosen afterward, or simply go with the flow. Suddenly, the goddess appears, questioning if he's alone again, and the boy tells her not to interfere with his fantasies. He explains that the two went to the capital, and the goddess comments that this has been happening a lot lately. Reflecting, the boy understands that the goddess is right, and he doesn't see them shopping, so he asks why they're doing this. Then the woman questions whether they are abandoning their master because they lost affection and went to work far from home. Seeing this, he thinks that thanks to magic, he he was able to cut back on their food, and that we cannot appreciate living it, and that both are adults. So, of course, they want to enjoy delicious food and have fun with nice clothes. And here he is, like the old man, making them play only the games he wants to play. He thinks they got tired of him after going alone to the capital. At that moment, he wonders what he should do if they decide to sell themselves in an adult establishment. Running to the sea while crying, he states that this has no chance of happening, claiming that he didn't even give them a means of subsistence, and that to exploit them, he first needed to provide them with a happy life. He decides to reflect and work hard, approaching the two who call in their names. He comments that they can ask for anything they want, and then he pleads for them to stay with him. Seeing this, the girl begins to tear up. The boy is in complete shock as she has tears on her face out of nowhere. He thinks they had very difficult lives and needed to hold back their tears. Then he tells the woman to wait a moment as he's going to withdraw money from his account. Then the woman tells him she will check Mr. Allan's bank balance. She mentions that he has $3 million remaining, and each doll is equivalent to 100 yen. The elf comments that she has diligently deposited the usage fees of the creation games into the boy's account. Looking back, he never misses his games in the guild's waiting room and with children on the street. He sees elderly people chatting freely in addition to merchants and adventurers as well. In shock, he realizes that this is very popular everywhere. Self explains that in order to obtain the rights to these items during excursions with the guild and merchants, they made a contract with the sacred spirit. So the moment it becomes a success, the guild will raise his rank to the highest classification, and with the condition that 1% of the sales be directed to his bank account. Seeing this, the protagonist wonders why the elf's eyes have been full of tears this whole time. Going wild, he says he understands and asks if they'll be shopping first, and he says he'll do anything they want. They both look at each other and start to think. Approaching, Self says she's grateful to the hero. That quickly, so says where they should go, that Noelle also mentions another place, and all of this starts dragging the protagonist crazy. Sometime later, they had bought more than 50 slaves. The one on the right says her name is Elle, the one in the middle is Tina, and the one on the left is Rai. One of them says her name is Aura. She says it's a pleasure to work with him, calling him master. At that moment, the boy thinks everyone is beautiful, and that this is every man's dream and harem. Self comments that from today on, the boy is the village chief, and Noel says they expect a lot from him. But the boy thinks they are plotting something. At this moment, the master has the responsibility to provide for more than 50 slaves, so he wonders what will happen to his supernatural life from now on. Sometime later, they were getting into bed, thinking about now having the responsibility of feeding 50 people every day. Self, getting out of bed, states that those two surely want something with this. A few hours ago, the slave tent, the elf commented that she would buy the girl on the side and also all the ones in the back. The merchant starts talking about the approximate price, but the girl says he should give a good price and considers the damage these girls have suffered. He should lower it by at least 2 digits, and asks if it wouldn't be cheaper than keeping unsold slaves in the inventory. To negotiate equally with the slave merchants, Sylph began treating the slaves as merchandise. The protagonist then thinks she is very skilled at persuading the experienced merchant, as if he were an indecisive man. After one of the slaves was freed, Sylph approaches her, and the girl says she is sorry, but the elf tells her not to worry about it. The poor hero thinks this is what he admires in her. Crying thinks he was going to do a lot today. However, he gets nervous thinking that the elf's abilities are too strong to assimilate. He understands that someone reincarnated needs to calm down or it also die once and for all. Meanwhile, Noel thinks that this girl's abilities are about to burst. First, she states that the alchemy abilities this girl has are high level, being highly precise and definitely acquired through training. However, there is no way to discover the abilities before inclusion. Back in the present, the protagonist is in bed, desperate, wondering how things are going by so fast, and that he needs to think of a plan for the future. Meanwhile, the elf thinks that this should be right, and that Allan also takes big care of her. At that moment, tears appear in her eyes without her realizing. She was worried that she could be a disappointment, and after so many entertainment products, they only earned this, and that the boy just messes up the games every day, always letting her win and acting childishly the size of defeat. He, smiling, she thinks he can't possibly be that dumb, and that surely Yu was ready to face the merchants. Embarrassed, she thinks he's a little sweet in that sense, but she should keep it a secret. She, like all the slaves, was originally meant to be drained and used beyond the limit, but Allan got involved with her warmly, and it's obvious this will melt them, and that Allan doesn't buy people just to eliminate hunger. Thus, the protagonist ideal, approaching the elf, asks Allan if she may pass. The boy then says she's very nervous and should just sit somewhere comfortable, but Self says she's fine as is, and her companion says the same. Mainly, the boy wonders if she doesn't want to spend much time in a room with a man. He thinks he can't help but feel that his achievements are being taken away, and that the man praises their accomplishments. But he should also be properly recognized. He thinks he should use the opportunity to reaffirm his position. Then he says he is proud of them. The elf comments that he has been making a lot of money, and that it is true that her companion says he should use that money to feed the slaves. She concludes that this is not the place where he deserves praise, and her companion agrees. Seeing this, the protagonist wonders if this was a sarcastic comment. He wonders if she could be a little happy about earning 3 million coins and questions if she knows how much workers at her clinic earn. Reject the boy says he wants information about the Room of Futures, and ask her if she's okay with it. At that, the goddess comments that the room definitely smells bad, so the boy wonders why he's so nervous. Additionally, he says they should first convert the cost of buying the slaves into an individual debt for each year, and that once they pay off this debt, they'll be freed. So they should focus on agriculture and commerce, providing a workforce that converts into products and money. And they'll use this to pay wages. Each year, the debt will be paid. After this explanation, he asks what they think, and his mind becomes excited because this way, he can get rid of the obligation of keeping things as slaves. And it's a perfect solution after all. He thinks that this kind of entrepreneurial responsibility, meaning to ensure the lively event of employees, is just the beginning. At that, one of the girls tells him to wait a moment. The elf questions if he intends to sell all of them at the original price, and asks if he knows what the fair price would be for her, in truth. Then her companion also comments that it would be better for him to reconsider this idea. Only he can't understand this plan. His objective was to acquire talent to eliminate hunger. Nervously, the group understands that this was a rather painful blow. So still, he explains that he prefers not to use slaves just as slaves, and wants to avoid that. And in the end, he wants someone by his side. And if any of the slaves manage to pay off their debt in some way, that will be enough for him. Them. The plan completes as follows. Noel and the others will use alchemy to produce agricultural tools of fertilizers, taking advantage of the characteristics of the elves who are erased naturally beloved by nature, thus increasing the productivity of wheat and soybeans. Continue Ringing explains that the secret ingredient is the kitchen, and that with these 3 pillars, they'll be able to create new products, and that they'll seek funding through the Merchant Guild. After hearing all of this, the two are in shock and just don't say anything. Mary nervous, he wonders how this looks and if it worked. The elf then replies that she thought she'd gotten used to him, but that honestly, he surprises her. She says that in that case, to do things her own way as well. Surprisingly, Noel says she shares Sophie's opinion. After receiving this completely disheartening response, the boy understands that reaching the path to a carnal relationship will be a very long and challenging road. After leaving there, the elf thinks that she messed everything up because she couldn't recognize Allan's thoughts as her leader, who was very confused, and thus she couldn't respond properly. And she realizes she was being too appreciative of the person to who she owes so much. Crying, she thinks she totally disappointed him. However, she wonders if it wouldn't be all right to have a slave who could talk and express themselves. At that, her companion, Noel, approaches, calling out. Sophie says she likes her personality. Probably he doesn't like slavery, and comments that taking into account his desire to end hunger makes sense. Noel understands that she agrees on saving the girls and using restoration, and that the curls they bought are just like they were in the past, with issues in their bodies and their future stolen. She then states that this action seeks no reward, being just an action based on his kindness. However, the elf questions if he couldn't be a bit more ambitious. Then Noel explains that the girls they bought are also a bit confused about the situation. Sighing, the girl says it's true that they also need to explain this situation to them, and that eventually everyone will be able to understand Allan's kindness and generosity along with his intelligence. This mind understands that for the boy not to be unconsciously seduced by the girls, he needs to be watched. Confused, Noel calls for her friend Sylphie, who says it's nothing, and that they'll explain it to the others. After a while, the elf girl explained everything about the salary issue and how this will work for the slaves. One of the girls comments that these conditions are very favorable for them and asks if she doesn't want to question the boss again. Seeing this response, the elf understands it's normal for her to think that way, and that after everything that happened to use restoration, it's hard to imagine a master like that smiling. The elf apologizes, saying that this is Allan, and that it's best for them to get used to him quickly. Suddenly, another person raises her hand, calling the elf, who asked if she could call her Sylphie, and she says yes. Starting to understand, the woman asks if serving Master Allan requires offering her body, and if that's what she means. Comments. Answering the question, Sylphie comments that that's exactly it. She thinks that therefore this unease is understandable. Well, elves have been considered a symbol of beauty among rare species, and it's a lie to say they don't feel pride in that. It's not that they want to give themselves to any stranger that comes along. But if this lack of attraction in the shields are to be considered as such, if that's the case, it's going to be extremely frightening for an elf, since they were already in this position. And it may be difficult for other races, but it's normal for elves to have these confusions and conflicting emotions. At that, another slave asks the elf if she has no interest in women. The elf says she doesn't believe that's the case, but that sometimes she feels the protagonist's gaze on her body. Then she thinks that's how the feeling ends up crossing her legs. She states that in any case, there are things that are hard to believe. But Allan is not someone who harms others without any reason. She swears as an ancestral elf, and therefore she gently asks that everyone considers they've been deceived. At that, the other slave starts to comment that by the looks of it, he seemed to be a kind person. The elfin asks if everything is all right with Aura. Laura, smiling, the woman confirms it is. And she just thinks that Allan Samaya is quite an interesting man. After seeing everyone's side, now we get to see Aura's side. She feels very beautiful in a new outfit that fits perfectly. Everyone sees her as a narcissist who loves herself so much, and that's exactly why. After being captured and suffering greatly, her skin burned with her fate being sold to an unknown person as a slave for carnal relations and being humiliated. A lethal flaw was found in her heart, which supposedly controls the core of magic. And that in this world, that alone is reason enough for someone to fall into slavery, suffering a despair of losing her beauty and magic, thus only being able to wait for death. At that, she observes her Master Allan and the ancestral elf self. Looking out the window, she thinks that Lord Allan has very peculiar sensitivities, and that, in her opinion, is a rare type of creature. But as Sylph told her, he understands the great power of restoration more than anyone else. Yalfit explained that's why he plays dumb. But when everyone understands him, they'll be safe. However, observing the hero, she wonders if he isn't very foolish. And that thanks to the complete restoration of her powers. Her market value has skyrocketed, even so given that he has contact with the Holy Spirit. This must be maintained at all costs. She doesn't understand for what purpose this is happening. And if the Lord wants so much to heal a flaw in her heart, it wouldn't be difficult to give him her body. Because, as a race, elves are a mix of dignity and vanity. The women of this race daily reject any man who behaves like just anyone, and when they're interested in someone, it's a fiery passion. At that moment, she recalls something very important that happened back then. She remembers how the Lord looked at the parts of her body that stood out the most, and that Sylphie's divine expression would have been so enchanting. And if this is indeed his plan to make an elf like her fall, Lord Allan is truly skilled. A great veteran with experience on the battlefield of love. Confident, she understands that she must win this duel at all costs, and that the first thing she needs to do is what she promised earlier this morning. However, upon arriving there, she immediately sees the protagonist talking very excitedly with Sylphie, and in Aura's view, he was really very excited, animated, and happy to observe all of this. She calls him dear. Quickly, the protagonist looks back and wonders if he heard her. In shock, he wonders if he made her angry. He initially comments that he's looking at her with great intensity. At that, she gets very confused as she appeared beautifully in a new outfit. And yet he remains distracted like that. That as if Lord Allan doesn't even realize she's standing right there even though she's in front of him. And no, she thinks this surely can't be right. And at that moment, the hero invites or the player reverses with him. The Curio, on the other hand, understands that even though he was manipulated by Sulph and became the village chief without knowing, he still has self-respect. This reminds him of when Aura called him dear, saying that she, the wretch, was adding fuel to the fire. The boy suggests they play reversey since it's been so long since they last played. He thinks he doesn't need to worry as he's calm, and that after all, he's the village chief. If this were a corporation, he'd be a CEO, and if anyone took a wrong step, nothing would guarantee he wouldn't end it. Because for now on, he has to act cautiously, and right now he worked so hard just to get a glimpse of Aura's legs. Extending his hand, he says he truly recognizes her power and makes it clear that the winner can give an order to a loser. He realizes that this way he'll be able to admire her abundant assets, which he was trying so desperately to avoid. In his comparisons, He understands that Self is a very beautiful woman with well-formed curves, but Aura is a very beautiful woman with a more generous figure. Analyzing Aura, he notices that her charm is similar to that of an idol, but her behavior is more like that of a curious noblewoman. Interrupting the hero's thoughts, the elf calls for Lord Allan, who then decides to start. She asked if her board is in her color. Means she's won in a very short time. She then checkmates the hero right away. She asks what happens when one gives checkmate and shaggy. She questions Lord Allan if knocking over the Jenga tower is his defeat. In Shioji, the boy understands he's been completely annihilated, thus a total loss. Catching Self's attention, he says Aura was overdoing it, and that he doesn't want his master to win at anything. Watching the show, or comments that he was very charming, fleeing in shock. The boy shouts that Aura is very romantic. However, the wounded comments that he told her to fight seriously. But now he questions if he wanted her to show compassion, and that seeing him this way reminds her of a small animal. Smiling, she thinks it was really very fun, but in the end, she feels the pain, and at that moment, someone calls her. Sylphus says she did well, and that she spoke her mind completely. After hearing this, Aura starts to turn back. Seeing the smug smile of her elf companion, reflecting that they ended the meeting in such a forceful way, she could say she completely lost. At this moment, she wonders if that was the boy's objective, pretending to be manipulated. Biting her fingers, she thinks she can't refute him, meaning he'll have her in the palm in his hand, thus making him a very remarkable person. Sylphus agrees with her and comments that if R tries to approach with feelings of indifference, it won't end up burning her. Continuing, she says that as someone of the same race, she understands her feelings or to questions if she herself should know. Looking back with a smile, Seltha says that the first to fall in love will always lose. And after hearing this, the woman just starts to sweat. But then she sees Noel and Sylphus walking away in silence. In her mind, she thinks about the monstrosity at his Lord Allan and his closest companion, the elf Sylphus. She decides she wants to become someone as brilliant as that woman. Confident, she says she'll take the other elves' warning seriously with all she has, and that the more challenges she faces, the more enthusiastic she becomes. An inventor of all recreational objects, Allan ended up becoming a punching bag, losing every game he played. The goddess comments that if someone were to write about him, it would look something like this. Crying, the boy tells the goddess to stop her attacks right now. But the one explains that in the world of goddesses, this article ranks #1 on the list of people they wouldn't want to reincarnate as. Changing the subject, she says, that's what they were talking about, and that surely you must already have preventive measures, but your reply is that he only has simulations and prepares responses, taking into account the rumors about his first order as village chief. He issued a ban on allowing the slaves to play the games he invented. He also says he reduced forced labor to a minimum, and it's not that he wanted to create a white company or anything like that. The goddess explains that if the village economy collapses, he could decide that. The man says that promoting benefits to his employees is the duty of the CEO and village chief. And this guy has comments that he's good at getting what he wants. However, the lifting of the ban he suffered brings a new method of torment for him. Constantly, Sylph, Noel, and Aura are asking to play against him, with the pretense of strengthening friendships, but in each game he has lost 50 times. He wonders if Sylph is upset because they mention to everyone. Reminding the villagers to invite him to play became a competition among the residents. The distance between the slaves and himself was gradually decreasing. As they have a common topic to talk about, the slaves are also getting closer. And with this strategy taught by SILF, it was a great success. As an adult, he should sincerely express his gratitude for that, and he believes he wouldn't be mistreated as a boy. Currently, they're living a very peaceful, ordinary life, but even so, it's hard to say that no one is discontent. Reflectively, he recalls Sylphie's magic, which is an unlimited formation of trees, and it seems wind magic can evolve to an even greater degree into tree magic. In other words, all elves were loved by the wind and received its blessing, allowing them to freely control all plants. Meanwhile, the dwarves with their earth magic and draw nutrients from fertilizer through the soil. And after preparing it, they can enhance it with germination, growth, and fortification. Suddenly, he starts fantasizing about the two main girls. On his knees, he thinks the slaves no longer respect him in the slightest. Sylph then mentions that if the soil is prepared correctly, mana consumption will be lower. She also comments that the fruits turned out well. Nervously, the boy says to let him do the harvesting. However, all the women say it's unnecessary and that he needs to rest. Within seconds, they start using wind magic. With a tear running down his cheek, the hero realizes each of them is incredible. And besides, obviously be incredible, they're also very cute. Frozen. He realizes that with all these beautiful and adorable girls, he won't soon be able to decide anything against them. He thinks he can't fall silent and let things end this way. So he slams his hand on the table and says he still has a card of his sleep. Leave and asserts that his reincarnation is just beginning. Saying, Self asks Allan what happened, or questions why he suddenly called the three of them to talk in the kitchen. The elf comments that if he's hungry, he could ask the girl to prepare something. However, the hero explains that no, he wants to try a new recipe. So he asks for Selfs and the others help. His plan is to make them strongly attracted to his food, so they won't be able to live without him. Himself approaches the hero, saying she did as he asked, preparing potatoes with wind magic. Quickly, he thanks her and then asks what Aura did. The girl explains she used wind magic to mash the beans. Actually, the beans are soybeans, but even so, they accept it. Horror explains that it's very tasty, and the hero thinks these are his modern-day knowledge. And now this is the true excitement he feels after reincarnating. Then Aura asks the boy what magic he used for this. However, Allan cannot and does not know how to use magic. At that, Aura apologizes to the boy who forgives her, and he calls for his slave Noel. Metal. Generally, dwarves have a characteristic called metal, where they are experts in metal manipulation, having a good compatibility with the earth element. And sometime later, she continues cooking. Seeing this, the protagonist is shocked because it's something brilliant. She's making this dish in an instant, and the utensils she used were made by her. Fire. Sometime later, he immersed a few potato slices in a temperature of 338 degrees Fahrenheit and sprinkled a little salt to finish. With the dish ready, he offers it to everyone, saying it's now time to eat French fries. The three girls stare confused as they've never seen this food before at that moment or begins to try the recipe. Apparently, she likes it a lot, and the hero is very happy because of her spectacular reaction. Also trying the fries, Selfie comments that it's really good, so much so that she's speechless and it would certainly sell easily. Looking back, he also sees the dwarf Noel trying the fries, and she seems to like them too. Rolling up his sleeves, the protagonist says it's now time for the main course, or then ask if he's referring to that hard, simple thing humans eat. She says she wouldn't call it tasty, but she'd definitely try it, and No agrees. The boy thinks that in this world, no bread is made with that fermentation from his world, and he now decides to make real bread using a special ingredient. The elf asks if he's referring to great skin. Then he answers yes, and that you should put it in a container with water and a bit of sugar. He celebrates dancing with the jars and then says it's time to show the trick he's been waiting for all this time. Determined, he uses his restoration magic and also his dark decomposition magic. At that moment, the hero thinks he's sure his astute readers have already guessed that when he said special ingredient, he was referring to yeast. First, upon seeing this display of power, the three are in shock. Then Sophie asks if you couldn't use magic, as that's what he said, and Aura asks what that means. In his mind, the boy wonders if he might have been mistaken this time. He explains that he can't use magic, but that he used his natural ability, restoration, for a moment. However, the elf points out that he called upon dark magic. Agreeing, the boy says that restoring is a magic he once imprinted in his mind. Shortly after reincarnating in this world, the goddess can be given additional information about his ability. Seeing her, the boy gets annoyed, asking what she wants now, and she comments that she accessed him for a special dream, so he shouldn't worry. At that, she begins by apologizing before anything else. She explains that his restoration ability is top-notch, but clarifies that due to certain limitations, the worst outcome the world had ever seen caused this restrictive usage. Which, making a small analogy, she explains it's like having a revolutionary operating system with only 8 megabytes of RAM. So the goddess calls him 8 megabytes RAM, and the boy asks if she can stop insulting him with such cold terms. Continuing the explanation. She says that restoration has many uses, and they're all integrated into the power given to him, and that by hearing a spell once, he can imprint it and then restore it when needed. However, since the protagonist's memory is poor, he can only use it once with a limited duration of 30 seconds. She says that, as the boy's body is also weak, he can only restore things that retain a material form. Once used, he returns the spell to the register, unable to use it again, and more powerful spells are out of the question, as they would completely overwhelm him. Realizing all this, the boy thinks that his body is indeed quite useless. After this explanation, the goddess bids him farewell as dawn is approaching. In the present, the boy says that's why he can reproduce magic in this way, so Sylph says she understands. But the question is why he preserved this specific magic and whether it's meant to turn things into decomposition. With a smile on his face, he says that's not quite it, as it's not decomposition but fermentation, which is necessary for making good bread. Heard. Hearing the word fermentation, which had been unknown to them until now, the three girls are utterly confused. Very pleased, he thinks there's nothing better in this world, and seeing those surprised faces. He then explains that fermentation is similar to decomposition, and humans have learned to harness it, discovering many benefits. It explains that yeast breaks down the sugar and bread dough, producing carbon dioxide and alcohol. This allows them to make soft, fluffy bread. Said. Sophie says she had no idea about this. Noel comments that it's very interesting, and Aura says he has vast knowledge and respects him greatly for it. The protagonist thinks he was probably worried because his abilities are limited, but it's not the time to back down from this reincarnated life. That all approach the jar, marveling at the dark magic of decomposition. Seeing this, the protagonist is confused, trying to understand what's going on. In this case, the three jars are glowing, so if you wonder if the three of them also excel in dark magic. The girls ask why they gathered in the kitchen. When one of them thinks it's because he feels hungry, the boy explains that it's to try something new. Soon they all agree, and the idea is to attract them through food. One of the helpers shows the yams cut with magic. The other used her skill to press the soybeans. They continue cooking using the oil. Everyone is impressed to see this rare ingredient, and the boy shows that modern knowledge helped him. When asked what magic was used to obtain the liquid, they explained that the poor guy hardly did anything. But seeing him shaken, the curious one apologizes for the shameless question. Continuing with the preparations. The short girl is responsible for heating the pot. Dwarves are good at manipulating metals and earth, and the highlight of the little one is her skill with fire. There, the flames get quite strong this way. This surprises the guy, who notices the eye heating up quickly in the pot made by dwarves, until the idiot feels the weight of being useless. He thinks about the next steps of the dish, until he finally manages to make French fries. Everyone is surprised by this food. The taste is simply wonderful and surprises the girl, to the point of almost making her addicted to that flavor. The other one is left speechless to explain, so her idea is simply to start selling. Now, the cook waits for the reaction of the other. It's complicated to understand her facial expression, but it's clear that the third one liked it. So what remains is the main dish, which is bread. One of them seems to hate this food of humans. It seems that the dough is hated by the gluttons. He reflects that the bread of this world doesn't go through fermentation, and that ends up making it bad, meaning it lacks something essential. He asked his colleague to put some grape skins in a glass with water and sugar. Then it's time to shake that to mix. This trick has been kept by the clever one all this time. His destructive restoration magic is concentrated there. Reflecting, the sly one remembers the yeast extract. The fact that he can use magic surprises them too. Then the chef wonders if he made any other mistakes, but soon decides to explain. His power isn't about mysticism, but rather his restoration ability. The issue is that he called it black magic. However, it's just a power recorded in his brain. We see when the boy was sleeping after being reincarnated, something mysterious seems to awaken him out of nowhere. A woman prepares to give an additional explanation about his ability. As he complains about it being late at night, she explains that it's a dream. Before she answers his question about this explanation, the entity apologizes. He has a privilege as a reincarnated one, and that is his restoration ability. The problem is that his lack of capacity limits its use. So much so that the poor guy is compared to a computer with less than 8 gigabytes of RAM. In fact, it's as if the guy had only 8 megabytes. And the fool even asks her to stop using those terms. She soon decides to return to the subject of his ability. His restoration has all meanings. That is, the lucky one will be able to use a magic he saw only once, as long as he can record it in his brain. The thing is, the poor guy is so bad that he can only record it once and use it for only 30 seconds. Besides, his weak body can only restore what can preserve a material form. So, the weakling realizes that he can only record one magic and won't be able to use it again. Plus, it can't be something strong so as not to overload him. Thinking about this, Allan soon realizes that he really is trash. She decides to leave since it's almost morning, only for the young man to insist that the goddess stay and answer other questions. Back to the present, the dark-haired boy wonders why he accepts the deity's snubs and begins to explain his spell. The other question is why his power specifically transforms spoiled things into other materials. Listening to Sylphie, the protagonist explains that it's not spoiled, but fermented, and it's necessary to make bread. None of them know what that means. He is happy to see their shocked faces. Because, taking advantage of this, the boy explains that fermentation is a process of deterioration used by humans. It is through yeast that the fluffy and soft texture of bread is obtained. This information is a great surprise for the three. Seeing them amazed like this makes the boy happy. But even so, it's not time to brag about being reincarnated, and someone seems to pick something up. All three begin to replicate his mystical trick. He is shocked to notice this. The three are also extremely skilled in tree, wind, and metal magic. But they even know about dark spells. The magic that the poor guy kept so well was used so easily. In this, it's inevitable not to remember the judgments of the goddess. Then the rascal continues mocking Allan's situation. To make matters worse, the fool is enchanted by her beauty. Meanwhile, the entity is happy with his actions. Then the idiot simply leaves again, leaving the chef behind. And as time passes, the girls learn to make bread perfectly, to the point that they become fascinated with the dough. Seeing them like this makes him much happier. Before reincarnating, the poor guy only made Mizuki happy. But now the cook can make many people smile. So the fool thinks everything would be better if he could do something plus 18. Out of nowhere, two other teenagers appear to approach him and ask if there's anything to eat. We see that Allan intends to hold a bread festival. Sylphie notices that many there liked it precisely because they didn't have much access to food. Many lived with their hearts closed. But with the protagonist's help, everyone began to open up. It was his natural charm that managed to help the rest of the people. The food cooked today is part of one of the boy's 3 mental pillars. Plus, these dishes will bring in good money. She remembers the whole process and effort the scholar put in, and how he brought new concepts that she didn't know existed. Then, the awkward one wonders if the ally can't read evaluation scrolls. Her conclusion is that everyone intends to unite and walk towards the cook's ideal. Meanwhile, Aura continues to delight in the little bread. At first, her opinion was that the protagonist was delusional in saying he intended to end world hunger. But his knowledge and revolutionary spirit surprised her. As she is a proud high elf, the noble soon resolves to give back and help him with his goals. However, now her priority is to eat more bread. Said, "We see Noel also enjoying this new flavor." Her reflection is that everyone would keep these good flavors to themselves. But Allan spread them to everyone simply because the altruist wanted everyone to eat too. In recent days, the introvert has been acting a bit strange. After all, her heart seems to race at the sight of the chef smiling. She thinks she isn't as smart as Sylphie. Yet still, the short girl wants to be useful and make the reincarnated one even prouder. Always striving harder, for her greatest desire is to receive head pats. When they started having this thought, a rascal suddenly came and kidnapped the poor protagonist. Remembering the day, the dark-haired boy developed fermented bread with black magic. They also played several games and he lost them all, but he was happy to see their smiles. He's very cheerful about everything that happened and wants tomorrow to be even better. Tonight, someone seems to enter the house as he sleeps. The noise seems to be approaching the bedroom. Then the idiot thinks it's a plus 18 visit in the middle of the night, having impressed them with the bread. We see the fool thinking that they were all enchanted by his culinary skills. His stress and anxiety are evident. Then the idiot just stands there waiting for his first time. A half-spider invader approaches. Seeing this monstrosity frightens him. Then the criminal simply asks for his silence. Spiderwebs begin to wrap around him. Despite this strange form, she is still very beautiful and says she won't devour him. The ceiling of the place suddenly starts to break and she realizes they don't have time to talk, until she soon picks up her victim in her arms and Allan becomes enchanted. The arachnid begins to flee the house. It happens that the rascal is soon ambushed by some people. His 3 partners appear to save him. In this, the kidnapper reflects that her opponents are 2 special elves and an elderly dwarf. Her chances of facing them are slim. Him? So the sly one simply apologizes and shoots her webs. Then she makes a huge leap over the 3. Her speed leaves them all in shock. The fact that it's night will help her escape her pursuers, and the crazy one soon enters the woods all at once. The only thing the poor guy can do is wonder how all this happened so quickly. A fierce battle should have happened by now, and he reflects that he was abandoned after they merely pretended not to allow it. This breaks his heart for not being saved. He starts to think he will try to find an escape route on his own. But the airbags of his enemies soon comfort him. They approach her lair. The cook is thrown to the ground. He soon demands his release as well. It's impossible to try to free himself from the webs. Reflecting, his opponent is an arachne, a species known as masters of weaving, which is quite dangerous. He was captured to heal someone. Someone leaked information about his abilities, and the girl seems to be calling someone. A voice suddenly appears to attend to her. This person complains about the fact that her companion has kidnapped someone. The other spider comments that there was nothing to worry about. Her name is Raya, and she quickly apologizes for her older sister's behavior. While they argue, the idiot reflects that they are 2 relatives with good airbags. The two continue talking and commenting on him being a complete feast, and Allan notices something. The younger one seems to be quite injured. Then, the other ends the discussion and approaches the dark-haired boy. Her doubt is whether the kidnapped one can heal her younger sister. The idiot thinks that he doesn't mind having a yandere girlfriend, but it's still something frightening. He also reflects that he has the restoration ability, but fear is being discarded after helping them. Still, it's his only option. Previously, the researcher had some questions, and his fear made him polite. Even the arachnid acknowledges that there is no need for so much formality. Getting straight to the point, her injuries will be difficult to heal. Knowing this leaves them quite surprised. So much so that the brave one makes it clear that he will show no mercy if they harm his friends. And the goddess resumes mocking his situation. But when questioned, Neck makes it clear that she hasn't done anything against his companions. She gives her word as the only thing she did was kidnap him. He still doubts whether his adversary is trustworthy, until the woman swears by her family. Hearing this makes him more contemplative, just for the entity to appear and annoy him further. Before anything, he demands that the two make the spirit oath so they can negotiate, but someone denies it. It turns out that the older one fears that the three will attack them, as if they swear they won't be able to defend themselves. This condition is unacceptable for the girl. She notices that the protagonist has started smiling out of nowhere. There, upon reflection, the cook realizes that his assumption was wrong, because the poor guy reflects that he was probably abandoned. After all, his allies were powerful, meaning they wouldn't let him be kidnapped easily, so they didn't even try to truly help him. The poor guy thinks that their idea was to get rid of an annoyance like him. Thinking about his situation, the unlucky one notes that being in an isekai, he should be privileged. Since it wasn't possible to act like a protagonist, what remains is to try to be nice, and he is determined to make her accept his condition. Just as Neck cares for Raya, our boy also has important people and wants the spider not to attack them, otherwise the healing won't happen. Sylphie tries to find him and remembers that her role was to protect him, but she failed. They decide to ask the elves for help since the kidnapper went to the forest. Besides, the three notice the shine on her leg, which makes the kidnapper a commander of the demon lord of lust. There are 7 demonic entities that control the sins, and even being a servant of one of them, they are bothered by having been overcome so easily. Reflecting on her abilities, they recognize that within the darkness, they will be defeated by the opponent. But there is a plan to resolve this. A bloodsucker seed appears and surprises one of them. The idea is to use it to locate sounds and locations. They hear Allan being very polite with the spiders. So much so that they are puzzled about why he is being so polite. They hear the oath that he will show no mercy if they mess with his family. All the girls hear those brave words, knowing that the cook has placed them above his own safety, practically moves them. The magic crystal is soon squeezed. They start dividing teams to begin the rescue, and they are so determined to bring him back home. Meanwhile, the boy wonders if he will be saved if everything goes wrong, and the goddess obviously doesn't give that spoiler. He tried to negotiate the situation but failed miserably. She seems to have human legs. The protagonist is surprised to see her separate. Then the fool continues to be enchanted by the arachnid. So the rascal remembers that if her sister is healed, she will let the guy do whatever he wants. As she uses her own body to negotiate, Allan is in shock. His surprise is so great that the boy struggles to remember his real objective there, so much so that he is torn between accepting and refusing this proposal. But his memory starts to help him think. Mizuki's memories make him recall when the girl judged him for looking for computer stores. In that, the annoying one demanded that he spend money on her, not on equipment. At the time, the fact that he was spending so much made the girl also need a job, all because of lust, and remembering this helps keep him calmer and more thoughtful. The first point to consider is safety, but for now the chef is fine. In second place comes the safety of his allies, and everything seems calm regarding that. And Raya puts leaves in his nostrils. So, the main problem is the arachnid, who seems to be disgusted by the situation, until the kidnapper seems to sense something. So much so that she decides to step back for now. Then the two suddenly start to leave there. Something is soon noticed by the kidnapped. A magical barrier is created in the middle of the forest. Seeing this surprises him more and more, because all his allies showed up for the rescue. One of them looks him in the eyes next, and apologizes for the delay in appearing. The magic soon manages to free him from the webs, and they were able to create the barrier because he bought time. Hearing this leaves him quite surprised. Then, upon looking closely, the cook notices that all the elves have gathered. Sylphie catches the protagonist's attention at this moment to thank the boy for his trust in her, because she thought the poor guy was trying to buy time by pretending to be naive. The sisters reappear out of nowhere to confront them. At this point, The group leader notices that the opponents have given up on fleeing. They all stand face to face at this moment. Seeing this situation, Allan feels even more lost about what to do. What's left for the idiot is to bluff that everything was planned. Each of the people present is surprised by this statement. The atmosphere of the place tightens with this. Even so, his courage is soon recognized. Then the kidnapper decides to acknowledge his virtues. This reaction from the enemy makes his allies praise his insight. Right, such compliments make him even more excited. The idiot starts to fantasize about the situation and feels happy to have been saved. It would have been much easier for them to abandon him, but the fact that he was saved makes him feel capable of doing anything. The group gathers confidently as the situation has changed. Thus, they can negotiate in a balanced manner, and the kid is really confident. This convinces the arachnid to cooperate as best she can. One of her conditions is that he never lays a hand on Raya. His request remains the same, which is to keep his allies safe in exchange for the healing of the kidnapper's younger sister. This leaves them quite thoughtful now. Overall, the terms continue to be favorable for the sisters, and the negotiator doesn't want to be deceived. So she ends up thinking that her body might be included in the negotiation, but the protagonist's 3 companions refuse immediately. This situation leaves the cook quite shocked and unsure of what to propose, until he remembers their web abilities. Then, his desire is to receive a bit of the arachne's threads regularly. This question visibly makes them uncomfortable. Seeing their reaction, Allan also blushes. Then his allies start demanding an explanation. With this, the poor guy realizes that the part where everyone was kind has come to an end. They all pressure him to know why he wants this in exchange for the healing of the younger sister. Sylphie begins to reflect on the situation, because she thinks she won't be disappointed if her master is interested in them. The fact that he prefers to relate to Iraqis rather than an elf is frightening to her. To her, it's absurd for him to suggest such a thing, so much so that she feels very frustrated. Meanwhile, Noel starts to reflect on the protagonist's incredible abilities, but she feels insecure after hearing his request, and she also feels saddened by it. Even Aura seems quite confused by all this. She tries not to behave like her other friends. Besides, the noble also wonders if it's just another one of the cook's tricks. Then the maiden thinks that the boy didn't understand the problem with his question. We see that Allan is still unsure of what's going on. The arachnids blush and feel awkward after his question. Now the dark-haired boy asks his colleague what's happening. He discovers that asking for the threads of an arachne has another meaning. It's like asking for their hand in marriage. So the chef understands why everyone is surprised, and Ra obviously refuses because they just met. Then the goddess starts teasing him again, and asks if there's anything else the crazy guy wants, like a temple machine, for example. A few weeks passed since this incident, and the younger sister appears to deliver some threads to the healer. Upon seeing her, the boy thanks her immediately. It turns out that the wound was completely healed, however, he ended up losing his magical eye ability. Then the entity starts to tease him again, saying that the useless one could have avoided this if he weren't so weak. At that time, the hill belonged to the Spider Sisters, who sent a small spider to investigate a strange noise. The little creature saw Allan using his restoration. That's when Neck decided to kidnap him to help her familiar. Now there is a spiritual contract in which the Arachnes will not use force as long as neither of them causes harm. Another clause is the restoration of Ra's injuries and the provision of high-quality threads, as well as the feeding of the little spiders who serve as workers there. It's a very good deal that the chef intends to maintain for as long as possible until someone calls him. It's Noel asking if the delivery is over. Then the little one gives more food to the creatures. They watch her do this. The dwarf gives fries to the little servants. At first, the elves were more resistant, but the dwarves have always liked spiders, because they are cute and have eyes that look like jewels. He praises this ability of the little one to notice that, and his new ally has a question. She wants to know if his boss feels better. We find out that the young woman is referring to Sylphie. They apologize for the misunderstanding of the proposal, but everything has already been clarified, because the desperate one made a point of explaining that he had no ulterior motives. Even so, his partner seems to have become very stressed about it, to the point of becoming much more focused on business. Then, we see that her plan is to become independent from the Merchant Guild, and he wonders what made her so anxious. The reason for this is that the poor thing thinks she won't be able to stay by his side if she doesn't make an effort. Then Allan starts to think that his companion intends to accumulate money and then abandon him. This is desperate because he doesn't want to be abandoned. Then all this starts to make him more stressed, and his other friend calls him. Time! The prototype of the item he ordered is ready. His idea is to gift Sylphie with this item. In his mind, it's a perfect outcome where everyone wins. So much so that the girls recognize that the boy seems quite excited. We see Neck acknowledging that the protagonist is an interesting boy. He is weak, but our boy's mind attracts her. And the funny one even suggests breaking the delivery agreement just to marry. Besides, the protagonist's confidence is capable of overcoming even the barrier between races. Her sister also liked the MC, and the Arachne thinks that all of this might have been a plan from the rogue, and someone questions her about her good mood. She assures that she is the same as always for Kyubi. We meet the fox who wants to know everything that happened. The arachnid explains that she found an interesting man, and upon reflection, she remembers that there was a vacancy available, because the position of Demon Lord is unoccupied. The furry becomes curious about this charming young man who was found. It is revealed that he is a human. This makes her reflect that she hasn't been involved with a human for a long time. Currently, the Demon Lord is chosen through recommendations and satisfactions. We find out that the mischievous one is the demonic entity of lust, who now decides to test the protagonist personally. Sylphie notices that after being bought by him, she always ends up being more surprised, and that's why the protagonist is a mystery. Even so, the idiot doesn't know how to deal with women. Then the fool shows her that he can take a piece without knocking over the tower and without using wind magic. This reaction of his makes her more enchanted. Although most elves were enslaved, none of them hate him and are surprised by the treatment he gives them. She continues reflecting on his actions and concludes that the boy never exploited or monopolized them. Even becoming rich, he always left them free and shared his wisdom. The way the clever one did this was through games. Their gaming encouraged the servants to act and speak because the boy never intended to win against them. Him, because his goal is to test their autonomy and how they act without his orders. In this, the elf reflects if he always self-sabotages or if he does it on purpose. Recently, the dark-haired one even opened bank accounts for all his servants and left the ear-headed one managing the village funds. All this trust makes her very happy. Then the cook quickly calls her, asking if they can quintuple the workers' payment. This question makes her extremely surprised. Her reaction makes him feel awkward and even suggests just tripling or doubling. It's not something impossible because they are selling a lot of food, and that has greatly increased the revenue. Besides, the chef still has her take it out of his account to support the crafting costs for everyone. She is even more surprised by his intentions, because even in this situation, or on the day of the kidnapping, he never showed fear. So much so that he negotiated and solved their problem with the arachnids, despite that misunderstanding about the marriage proposal by mistake. She also notices that he never blamed them for being kidnapped. On the contrary, he still shared more profits with everyone. Even so, the elf does not consider it enough because her desire is to help him even more. His potential is to become king, and her fear is not being able to keep up with him, until the poor thing slaps herself to come back to her senses and focus even more on her activities. Not to mention that the manager soon starts thinking of the best ways to assist him. Now we see the protagonist becoming determined to do whatever it takes, and the dwarf decides to go to work. She opens the doors to start the services. Her workshop is extremely impressive. All of this was built to transform the threads of the arachnids into fabrics, because his plan is to manufacture clothes there as it doubles the charm of women, and the idea is to use aura as a model because the clothing makes beauty stand out more. In the past, the rogue was fascinated by women's clothing, and his doubt is whether that fabric will also work for underwear. There, as the rascal reflects, his other partners watch everything. They all recognize that work is impressive. He looks at them right after. This makes them quite embarrassed. Then they thank the children for their help. Next, the two observe that the work is being done very well, and all of this is thanks to Noel's skills. Then Ra becomes even more determined to bring more threads, cards, and Allan assures that everyone will be grateful. He is happy to have consulted Sylphie about the business expansion, but the idiot believes that the manager thinks he is worthless. The cook believes he is taking credit from the workers for everything, and this makes him insecure, because his fear is that all of them will rebel against him when they become free. This was the reason he opened accounts for his servants and let Sylphie manage everything. This made her gain more power, and still the naive one wonders if everything will end badly, and the arachne brought more webs. Noel prepares to do the first test. We see the protagonist start testing the equipment. The strange thing is that as they begin to weave, the crazy guy remembers that he needs to make things plus 18. Then the fabric will be washed, dehydrated, and dried. Then it will be finished and stretched to the appropriate width. A beautiful fabric is created with this process, which leaves both surprised. Now, the idea is to turn that into clothing, but the reincarnated one is still thinking about how to do it, and Ross says she can do it. She seems quite excited to start this process. As always, the goddess appears just to annoy. We see that the young woman can make any type of clothing. Then the administrator returns out of nowhere, or as soon greets her at that moment, besides grabbing her to guide her somewhere. There. She takes the big-eared girl to their master. In this, the shy one comments that she is back, and she is warmly welcomed by the researcher, because the clever one made a dress for her as a gift to value her hard work. This gesture visibly moves her. The fact that her efforts have been recognized makes her very happy. Her happiness is so great that it even makes her want to jump. He also wants to see her wearing the dress now. So the manager goes and tries on her new gift. The dress is amazing, delicate, and would definitely be a hit in the capital. Of course, Allan thinks it looks great on her, not to mention that its design is also quite beautiful, until the elf notices that the rogue is eyeing her leg. This makes her embarrassed because it had been a while since she received such a look from him. Such a reaction makes her think she should wear clothes that show off her legs more, because the naughty one notices that her master likes legs. Out of nowhere, Neck interrupts this moment. The kidnapper came to pick up her sister. Then the rebel remembers that she doesn't need her there. Here! Besides, the mischievous one would like to talk to Sylphie. This comment surprises her right away. Meanwhile, all the girls comment that the elf liked the gift. He soon notices that she in that dress has great destructive potential. His plan was to win the gratitude of the enslaved, so they wouldn't abandon him after they gained their freedom. Even though it was embarrassing, he is happy to have made the request for the dress for Ra. The goddess notes that she served him well, and one of his abilities is to take measurements of female bodies. Her silence makes him quite anxious. Then out of nowhere, the entity leaves and leaves him talking to himself. Next, the girls finish their discussion and make a decision. The order is that Allan can never leave their base again. In other words, the poor guy is under house arrest, and the regent of the universe continues to tease him. A few moments before the announcement of the imprisonment, we see Sylphie questioning the reason for the conversation. The woman makes it clear that she just wants to get along with her. It turns out that there is a possibility that the master of the ear girl will be recommended as a demon lord. She remembers that Next serves one of those beings and hoped that this would come to her knowledge, but she didn't count on it. So the girl demands a more specific explanation about this, and the sly one stands up and approaches her. Because the naughty one loved the girl's dress. The fabric, the softness, and the shine enchanted her, because she really wants Allan's knowledge and the dwarf's skills to be well utilized. But of course, the trickster will offer something in return. The idea is to offer the territory of the arachnids in exchange for a spiritual contract. Besides that, the mischievous one also offers for her creatures to watch over the cook, and such an idea seems to interest Sylphie quite a bit. Initially, the idea was to cover the territory with a wind magic barrier, but this would be much more efficient. However, everything seems too good to be true. Then Neck remembers that it won't just be demons who will want to capture the boy. Other people like the wise man, the hero, and the sword saint will also come. Besides, no one would come out unscathed in a direct confrontation, so the strategist would like to borrow his power, because her sister is still very naive. Thus, the elf notes that the arachnid has been doing this to protect her own family. Then the manager remembers that her companion always noticed this. In this, the representative explains that she will talk to her boss, but the final decision is his. But regardless of his choice, the boy needs to stop going out recklessly. He will be a walking target for demons, adventurers, and guards. So she will tell everyone and will soon inform the boy about it. And however bad it is to create house arrest, it is a necessary evil. Returning to the present, he is visibly surprised by this. All of them immediately agree with this decision. Besides, the poor guy will only be able to leave if he has their permission. Then Allan thinks that they fear the boy will start making perverted clothes. Then, Sylphie explains that the protagonist is in life-threatening danger, and the idiot thinks it's because he is a pervert. Neck explains that the demon lord of lust is interested in him. After understanding the situation, the MC discovers that demonic entities are interested in his restoration. Now, the poor guy wonders why he didn't make a spiritual contract to keep his power a secret. But in fact, his ability is a cheat, and he is terrible in combat. In other words, a hero could easily defeat him, and that possibility terrifies him. He becomes very stressed about all of this, but he likes the idea of being pursued by the nine-tailed fox. However, reflecting on being human, the fool remembers that he has no reason to turn against his own kind. It turns out that a demonic entity doesn't need to turn against humanity. An example is the fox, which takes care of brothels and prevents crimes against women. He begins to understand this, but still finds it terrifying besides wanting to know how he will be recommended. His capital sin will be sloth. Of course, this is the position of the weakest demon lord, but he would be the first human to earn this title. By inheriting this power, a unique ability will be acquired. When the poor guy hears the details, he realizes that it's not anything very good. His power will be the ability to enhance the skills of his subordinates through familiarity. The issue is that this doesn't take effect on him, so the poor guy starts to think that it wouldn't be a good idea to become this weak entity, until someone asks if that doesn't suit him. As always, the goddess appears to mock the fact that he is supported by his enslaved ones. Seeing her infuriates him even more now, to the point that he throws pillows and complains about everyone distancing themselves from his presence. Then the boy is asked if he will accept the proposal. The thing is, he is not interested in that. His only desire is to continue living well. Besides, by becoming one of those beings, he would need to maintain some connection connection with society, and his doubt is what that would be. Then the creator of everything notices that there is something passing through his mind. The cook is surprised by this question, but there isn't an exact answer, until an idea suddenly emerges out of nowhere. At first, the plan is to create a resort with shopping malls, hotels, businesses, services, restaurants, and various other entertainment options. However, it would be his responsibility to manage everything, and the poor guy felt responsible for others' happiness. Then the blonde agrees that the boy wouldn't have that capability. He just wants to escape reality and calm down, because his goal is simply to have a comfortable life. If the young man were to gain the title, his servants would end up working even harder, and he doesn't want to overload them, because a grounded life is much better. It happens that he has nothing to lose by suggesting these ideas to them. After all, the deity considers him a parasite who could never govern anything. Remembering his sister, his family would also have a similar reaction, and the rascal decides to suggest this at dinner as a joke. Then the unbearable one disappears and he goes to eat. They are all surprised by his proposal. Still, seeing them like this, it's clear that the fool ends up disguising his feelings. Just for one of them to find the idea interesting, Sylphie offers to help. It's a wonderful idea for the manager. Besides, Noel also thinks it's a great opportunity. The two start asking various questions about how the businesses will operate. Even Aura likes this initiative, as she wants to show beauty to all the women in the world. These reactions leave him extremely surprised, especially the noble's idea, which drives the pervert crazy. They remember that the demon lord of lust will soon visit them in person, and the elf begins to reflect on the preparations for her arrival. Then the idea is to offer the best hospitality to the fox and convince her to accept Allan's ideas. The two sisters agree with the initiative. It's clear that the three also like this strategy, so it's time to get to work, until the poor things notice that the idiot has fainted while standing during one of his perverted moments. We see the dwarf waking up in the morning. She quickly feeds the vigilant spider. The worker begins to reflect on all the tasks for the day. Then the girl decides to wear the clothes given by the chef only after work. In this, the short one remembers that it was just Sylphie who received the first gift due to her effort. When Allan spoke about freeing the slaves, it meant that it's impossible to achieve dreams through force or pressure. Then they reflect that this is his true objective. His desire is to continue lending his powers to the enslaved even after their freedom. Since they have personally experienced this method, all that remains is to trust him. The short one notes that the manager always understands their master's intentions, which makes her incredible, and the other dwarves get along well with him. Then logically, those who produce the best results will be rewarded, and this motivates her to give her best. Since the cook is her savior, her wish is to make him happy. Then the clever one remembers that the rascal always looks at her colleague's legs, and she would also like him to look at hers. We see the protagonist acting as an administrator. However, the boy notices that there isn't much to do at work. As the crazy one reflects on this, Sylphie suggests cultivating new plants to entertain him. She shows an encyclopedia to the poor guy, who remembers that he still doesn't know how to read the writing of this world. Even so, the fool is enchanted by what he sees, until the elf notices a discouragement in him. After all, there is no rice there, so what remains is to cultivate sugarcane. They use earth magic to plow the soil more efficiently, and one of the servants tells him to go inside and stop wasting time. Then the useless one decides to help with the clothes. He reflects that the loom mechanism is quite complex and advanced, so he should help to provide food and clothing for his employees. We see Ra working hard early in the morning. The maniac begins to question her about the clothing pieces they will make, and then the researcher quickly shows the designs he prepared. Seeing him putting his servants first, the arachnid decides to help him. Two of them soon receive beautiful garments. Another one also wears a lovely sweater, and this leaves him amazed. Then one of the workers thinks that it will be deducted from her salary. So Allan makes it clear that this is a gift and will not be deducted from their money. Thus the young woman decides to accept it gladly. Ellie also thanks him again and assures him that she will be in his care. Last time the village chief was defeated, but today he will win. Now his strategy will be to use what is called a perverted lucky moment. He quickly makes his move, moving the piece on the board game, and the goddess continues to underestimate him, but nothing shakes him. Thus the young woman simply admits her defeat and awaits his orders. This immediately cheers him up because his wish is to see her legs. She becomes embarrassed and asks her friends if something could go wrong, but they both deny it. He tries to express his wish until he is interrupted. Noel suddenly appears to talk. Then the cook notices that she is wearing her new clothes. Since she finished her work, she decided to dress well, and it suited her. Then Allan asks if his friend needs anything. We see that the dwarf created a cotton swab, so his request is that Ellie clean his ears. She notices that her master has accumulated a lot of wax. Then he realizes that his joy over winning made him lose focus. He starts to reflect on how Mizuki would react if she were in this world. Being so close makes him embarrassed because he really wants to see her outfit. Someone calls Sylphie from outside. We see the protagonist asking if he can harvest the sugarcane to cook. She agrees and asks what will be made. It is bread, a dessert to receive the demon lord of desire. Then the young man continues to reflect. He notices that his assistant has been wearing her new stockings all the time. This makes him grateful because they suit her very well. We discover that the two biggest stores in the capital were founded by the Elf and Aura, who dominate the sale of cosmetics there. In addition, the cooperation of the Araki sisters allowed the sale of more clothing, and the district led by QB buys many pieces. Meanwhile, he realizes that he has been falling behind. They notice the ingredients gathered there. He explains that it is to make warabi mochi. That day, everyone was delighted with the bread, and the wind magic let him see under their skirts. In other words, his strategy is to do the same thing now. The dish requires a lot of magic and will need their help. The sweet potato will be crushed by the wind spell. It will also help with the centrifugation and extraction of sugarcane juice. With water magic, they will be able to extract more refined sugars and molasses residues, and the goddess keeps teasing him until the cook finally takes action and begins to cook. No one watches every process. The other preparations are being made, such as roasting the soybeans and grinding them, and the mochi is ready for them to taste. Aura initially finds the dessert strange, but she becomes delighted after tasting it. But her excitement makes the scene lively, and he keeps his eyes on the movement. He ends up surprised right away, because everyone liked the new sweet. Of course, he is happy to see their reactions. This leaves him almost mesmerized. The dwarf also praises the mochi. She starts talking about the new clothing they are working on. When asked which length would be better, the small one shows her legs. This act leaves him mesmerized, and she suggests adding slits to the dresses like the one Sylphie has. QB seems startled by a noise. She and Necker are approached by someone. The elf suddenly appeared in distress because Allan disappeared from their village. This news surprises both. Even under house arrest, he was captured, and the deity asks how many times he will fall for the same thing. In this state, he cannot feel anything or know what is happening, and the goddess keeps mocking him who was kidnapped for the second time. He has no idea where he is. Something seems to draw his attention because he finally leaves the darkness. His feet touch the forest floor, or something seems to be in front of him. A horned woman apologizes, saying this was the only way to see him. Then he is startled to see someone wearing a kimono. Her name is Kwao, and she needs to free her village from an unknown disease. Then he notices that she needs his help. She proposes that he do whatever is necessary to assist her. Of course, he is surprised by the proposal. Then he calms down to avoid being distracted, and since his mouth is gagged, he only responds with muffled sounds. As she approaches, the woman removes the cloth. The deity mocks him again. Her stomach even hurts from laughter until someone touches her. She notices it is time for a break, but since it was amusing, she decides to take only a short one. She tells the other to leave and assures that she will tell everything later because they will meet in his dreams. Just for the woman to call him flirtatious. They argue and she finally departs. Then the horned woman asks if he feels better and he confirms it. He wants to know all the information in detail. Now the girl prepares to talk about her 3 sizes, and the boy finds that strange. It happens that she felt someone looking at her legs. Then the boy realizes he was caught off guard because her mystical eye can see through him. Their current location is the Yamato village, a place where the Onus live. This word surprises him right away. At maximum speed, this place is a 3-day journey from his home. In other words, time passes differently in the shadows. And he reflects that the QB has already visited him. His fear is that the entity has devastated his home. This sends him into a panic. He fears that his companions are injured and being enslaved again. For his only wish is that they all continue to smile. Besides that, the poor guy remembers something else. The wind magic security system and detecting spiders were easily bypassed. His doubt is whether it was easy to kidnap him. The local security was actually great, and the horned girl herself acknowledges that. So the dark-haired boy questions how the kidnapper got past those barriers. She feels awkward answering him. It turns out her species specializes in hiding, and there was a flaw in their system. Problem. That problem was Allan himself, who was sleeping without a care. The state of her village is terrible, and she knows a verbal agreement is not enough. Her suggestion is a spiritual contract, and the cook notices that the Oni intends to risk everything for her people. Of course, the protagonist could help her, but the boy knows she wouldn't let him refuse precisely because of her desperation. Even worried about his home, he agrees to help her. This excites her immediately. In his imagination, the village chief will consider him a hero and offer him his daughter. Then the two finally introduce themselves once and for all. Practically all of them hate the presence of a human there. They even think that Ku intends to betray them, and of course the chef feels awkward. One of the individuals living in the village grabs his gourd and continues to insult the horned girl, and the vessel is thrown in her direction, just for the fighter to easily break it. Then the protagonist notices that her hand is like a knife. It turns out the leader harbors a lot of resentment for the evils humanity has done in the past, but seeking revenge against them is madness. And the young woman remembers that she was banished not long ago, and therefore will do as she pleases. So much so that she orders the man to follow her. He becomes afraid upon realizing there is a plan to eliminate humans, and someone tells them both to wait. The elder's order is for his henchmen to capture the traitor and the cook. This is enough to leave him completely desperate. But she remains firm. Then the crazy guy starts to think they will do something perverted to the poor girl if they capture her, and if she is defeated, he will surely be next in line. A single punch from her devastates the first opponent. They are violently thrown far away. Her martial art is extremely powerful. So great is her brutality that they even believe the girl is a gorilla, so much so that the brute tells her partner to just get out of there. After all, these individuals only think about revenge. Despite everything, Allan notices that even though they are dangerous, he can still understand their point of view. It is evident that this place is very poor and has been purged by humans in the past. Naturally, they would never trust their lives to their former enemies. And he cannot understand how that crazy girl tries to solve everything with force. Then the reincarnated one confesses he cannot keep up with the pace of things. But the trickster always sides with the strong people. That's why he decides to follow her now. His reflection is that he will end up having the same fate as the other fools if he provokes her. The poor girl notices that even begging for help, her kind still thinks that way, and the protagonist tries to ease the situation with random words. In the past, the Onus were hunted by humanity, but none of them know the reason for this, and the fool still doesn't know what to say. She notices that her partner is awkward, and questions whether the healer harbors hatred for her race. Due to her nose being thinner than all of her kind, her ability is to detect negative feelings. So the clever one quickly asks if Allan is hiding something from her. To get out of this predicament, the trickster asks if bad thoughts or feelings are not normal. This is an aspect where both sides of the story are the same. In other words, the best thing to do is not to unnecessarily disturb each other if they want to maintain a peaceful relationship. But this answer leaves Kyle quite thoughtful. She recognizes that her new ally is strange, because he doesn't smell like the others when they look at him, and it's the first time he sees a human. Both are arriving in the regions affected by the disease, and the smell is quite bad. The area is completely deserted and devastated. They finally reach the location to be treated, but the protagonist tells her to wait. She finds it strange and questions what it is. Allan's desire is to check their condition, and he needs Quao to convince them that the boy is a doctor. The only reflects that the cook saved 50 people, and there's a possibility his ability is limited. But even the protagonist doesn't know how to answer very well. But since restoration doesn't depend on mangoes, perhaps there isn't a limit to the number of people who can receive his cure. It turns out the sly one is hiding some cards for his own safety and therefore won't act carelessly. She soon respects his decision. After all, such power belongs to the realm of the gods, and everyone would want to take it from the boy. Thus, her idea is to include this issue in their spiritual contract. And depending on the symptoms, the protagonist can treat them, but it's necessary to attack the root of the problem and prevent the disease from returning. After all, it would be terrible to continue being kidnapped over and over again, and the horned girl apologizes. She decides to deal with her own sins and begs the reincarnated one to help the children. It happens that the village leader doesn't blame her and reminds her that being kidnapped by good people is a blessing. They enter the place, and the guy wonders what would happen if his power were used for evil. Several children are sick and left on the ground. They feel numbness in their hands. They have lost their appetite, and their bodies are fatigued. Moreover, they have lost strength even to get out of bed. This makes them quite worried, as some are affected by heart failure. But something is wrong, and he wonders if it wasn't mentioned in Sylphie's plant encyclopedia. He has a question to ask. It might be a difficult question, and Q assures him she won't hide anything. So the protagonist gets straight to the point. His doubt is whether rice is the basic food of the Onis, and the brute is startled to see him know this. Knowing this makes him quite happy. We see the protagonist reflecting that all advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, meaning that with science, anything is possible. Not knowing this world very well, his conclusion is that medicine has become obsolete compared to magic. and the Oni wants to understand the situation. It turns out the clever one just wanted to seem cool, and she wants to know what the relationship between the disease and rice is. He's trying to explain, but her desperation doesn't allow it. The issue is that eating only rice caused malnutrition and a lack of vitamins, and she doesn't seem to grasp it very well. This problem is called cake and can be treated by switching the diet to brown rice. Then the poor guy realizes it will be a challenge to address this issue in this new world. So the idea is to make some of this rice, and he goes after her. Her because he has another question to clarify. Now she will show a village secret that explains the truth about rice. So Ku is trusting Allan's word. We see the boy reflecting on the problem of the food's lack of vitamins, but he can't find an explanation. Then the big girl throws several rice plants into the air. By using her Ashura ability, the fighter gains 6 arms that cut everything, and he discovers that the grains are polished with swords. He is surprised by this process, and any healthy Oni would do this. So the guy continues to be impressed by these abilities, and wonders how they were pursued in the past. But this comment obviously wasn't in good taste. The young woman notes that it was a genuine question since she didn't sense any mockery in it, but it's best to avoid saying that in front of others. He concludes that even being a master swordsman, there's no way to defeat an offensive spell, and this race probably hates sneaky blows. In other words, his kidnapping must have been a desperate last resort, and she apologizes for everything. Then they assess the ingredients, and the guy asks if there's garlic, and his ally doesn't quite understand. We see the dark-haired guy explaining the rice preparations, and the horned girl seems not to understand very well. However, the cook makes it clear that he will follow these steps. The patients will be fed this 3 times a day, and soon they will need extra resources, meaning it's good to expand the field. Fortunately, the chef has experience with agriculture. Besides, the reincarnated one also wants some rice because he is hungry. But at a certain moment, everything complicates as one of the children refuses to cooperate with a human. This reaction makes the brute furious and tells the little girl to be careful, while Allan proves he hasn't poisoned anything. However, the little one refuses to cooperate and even says that the smell of garlic is terrible. But Ku stops her partner from tasting the tea, for her brutality emanates from her body, and soon demands that the short girl apologize. After all, she is the master and needs to demand good manners from her disciples. The poor protagonist tries to intervene and ends up taking a punch. This makes the little girl think that her teacher has turned against the healer. They start fighting again because the little girl doesn't want the tea, and the kidnapped one is left lying on the ground. With each passing day, the duo continues to treat their patients. Now the Onis have managed to fight against malnutrition, and they are recovering in the blink of an eye. A month later, the cook is relaxing. Someone comments that they only see a weakling there. He tries to pretend he isn't there. The thing is, his opponent has already spotted him. We see Rin challenging him alongside the other little ones. The doctor soon notices that everyone has recovered. Even the leader of the place thanked him, although he still harbors resentment against humans, not to mention that the fact they talked makes him quite happy. At that moment, the little boy charges at the chef. Even the other little warrior beats up the poor guy. They treat their sensei like a weakling. To make matters worse, the poor guy can't use his restoration either. Of course, the other little demon continues to tease him. She makes a point of belittling him whenever she can, but it seems she has lowered her guard. The poor injured one notices that he is being disregarded. Besides, the little brat keeps provoking him in various ways. She is 12 or 14 years old and is a student of Q. In this, he reflects that the little pest reminds him of Mizuki. Even though he is used to the Oni village, the cook recognizes that he needs to leave. Before he can act, the unbearable one asks if he has done anything plus 18 with her master. This teenager thinks that Allan has turned the brute into a slave. Although she fits his type, even he has limits and fears her. Then Rin decides to give a special lesson to the reincarnated one. The information she gives is that the horned one has a sensitive nape. Such information leaves him extremely shocked. After dropping this bomb, the clever one runs away. He wonders what his partners are doing now. The issue is that his concern has been growing, and he needs to return home as the village he is in is very isolated. In other words, his only alternative is to ask the big one for help. And the pervert wonders if it would be right to invite her to be his first. Although Ku is very strong, the mark of slavery might end up preventing her from being harmed. But rumors say that when doing those plus 18 things for the first time, you gain confidence and emotional composure, and popularity among girls increases. Soon the possibility of relating to his new ally makes him happy. At that moment, the Oni herself appears in front of him. It turns out that the powerful one has prepared for this moment. He is startled to see that the location of their private conversation is on a cliff. Seeing the situation, the cook begins to feel paranoid. Sylphie and Aura were worried about their master's disappearance. Not even wind magic can track him. And even Kyubi helps in the investigation. Her advice is that the absence of a trace can also be a clue, and this occurrence is typical of Onus. After all, this race specializes in infiltration and espionage. Raj gets furious with this delay and her sister calms her down. Then Noel suggests that Iraq need be the commander of the children. To make matters worse, Allan is too weak to defend himself fully. The elf states that she also feels they need to act as soon as possible. But they need to use intelligence. As the days go by, the poor girl sees that her beloved is nowhere to be found. Her despair is so great that she even cries. Neck soon appears in the manager's office and states that their wait is over. Because with her demonic eyes, the spider can obtain any information. The downside is that it takes a month to awaken, however, the sly one had permission from her boss. Not to mention that her sister also tried to use it and ended up getting seriously hurt. In this, the lovesick one begs her ally to find the cook, no matter the cost. However, from now on, the witch demands that the manager get along with her younger sister. Hearing this, Sylphie fully agrees. Once this agreement is made, the mischievous one decides to help with the sly ones. They all discover that the village chief ended up in a distant village. Soon, they all resolve to rescue him. In the present, out of nowhere, all the allies arrive in the Oni region, just at the moment when the protagonist was about to make the +18 proposal. Of course, the horned girl is startled that her home has been found, but soon discovers that they came to rescue him. This initially seems to calm her down. Then the girl remembers that her friend had something else to say. At this moment, the rogue is unsure of who to talk to. He doesn't know whether to thank her for the rescue or to be honest with his new friend. An idea pops into his head, and she will use it to make even the lust demoness take him seriously. Now, the reincarnated invites her to combat racial discrimination. This proposal leaves her incredulous. She can hardly believe that her savior had this idea. In her mind, a human offering, this is like a marriage proposal. It turns out that the warrior has gotten used to people desiring her as a woman, or even wanting her power, but this is different. The rest of the group soon arrives and the horned girl prepares to explain the situation. Then the dark-haired guy quickly greets his other allies. He comments that their delay allowed him to finish what he had to do there. Besides, the cook mentions that he was getting bored. These words make the brute think that all of this was planned by him. She notices that all the girls of different races came from afar to rescue him. Even a demonic entity showed interest in the guy. If it weren't for her amount of mana, the Q would challenge her to combat. Then the fighter remembers his proposal, until the chef calls her to meet the other women. All this situation ends up leaving her confused. So she explains that she's used to this because she is a rare type of Oni called Genki. Moreover, the dark-haired girl notices that the protagonist seems like a child at certain moments, and at others speaks extremely seriously and confidently. All of this makes her think he is a man worthy of receiving her services. Thus, the demoness swears her loyalty to the protagonist. The one who seems to find the situation strange is Sylphie. She begins to notice that this is probably a pact between the two and doesn't seem to like the situation much. After all, the big girl is another girl falling for Allan's nonsense. So the elf decides to talk to her. In the end, it's obvious that the manager is just dying of jealousy until someone calls her. Her master apologizes for worrying her and thanks her for the rescue. She thinks everything was part of his plan. As the boy seems to dodge the topic, the business administrator begins to reflect on his strategy. No matter how strange his desires to end prejudice and hunger are, he makes others believe in his goals. However, what relieves her the most is the fact that he is safe. Then Aura explains that when a human offers an only-woman union to end discrimination, it ends up being a marriage proposal. The Oni explains everything that happened and admits that she acted out of line. Although she feels sorry, none of them seem to have been offended by what happened. The fact that he managed to resolve the entire situation without using restoration impresses his secretary. He seems to feel and see nothing. It turns out that QB and Neck left in a hurry, and he seems to have exceeded her expectations. We see the insecure idiot thinking he messed everything up with the entity until someone calls him. Rin explains that she guided the visitors through the house, and the guy explains that he will prepare dinner. She asks if her rival is leaving. This question surprises him. He quickly realizes that the little brat is afraid of being alone, and of course the little rascal dodges the topic. Then the village chief reflects on the situation and invites her to study abroad, and the newcomers arrive at the protagonist's base, and each one of them is impressed by what they see. The children are amazed by the innovations there. The big issue is that his actions have dropped. Everyone has been worried since his disappearance, and they are happy to see him well, but it seems that something is wrong. So everyone knows what happened to him during this time away because of the investigations they conducted. It's embarrassing for the boy to have been kidnapped and rescued again. Plus, he thinks of himself as a useless person being supported by the enslaved. The goddess appears to gloat over the protagonist's drama, and they talk about her working remotely. As the two discuss, the entity shows that his friends are gathered, and what is happening is the organization of a welcome party. Both talk, and the cook seems to know what the deity wants, although she dodges the topic. He discovered a hidden function of his power that reproduces sound within a 3-meter area for 9 seconds. His idea was to build a giant bathtub for the girls to bathe in so he could hear them there. Then the clever one decides to use this ability to listen to their conversation. We find out that none of them wish to be his enslaved anymore. This discovery leaves him quite shocked. We see Aura discussing this with her friends. Their eyes show this determination, so they decide to talk to Sylphie since everyone desires freedom. Because the maiden's will is to support Allan as a woman, not just as a servant. She remembers that his ideals are to end hunger and discrimination. These are the characteristics of a king, and this makes him even more charming. They all run together after the administrator, and they position themselves to confront her about this matter. At that moment, the noblewoman questions if her friends have something to say to the village manager. Noel asserts that they are all there to discuss the same topics. They reflect that they share the same goal, and that it was all because of the protagonist. We see the local leader reacting to their claim. Through the women's eyes, the girl can already see the feelings of her companions. They were all extremely impressed with the cook's skills. So much so that the businesswoman feels the same way as her companions. He wants to do so many things that he doesn't even give orders to his employees. In other words, the chef expects them to take initiative and think critically, always aiming for the best results. So to accompany him, will and resolution are necessary, and one of them asks something to the elf. Since she comes from a rare species, she should never have been enslaved, and so she is asked if she has never thought about being free. Then the passionate one assures that she dreams of freedom. She imagines a scenario where they are no longer slave and master, and she guarantees that she would want to stay by his side and make him happy. After all, she trusts him a lot. But even now, there is a future where the intelligent one wants to be by his side. That's why the clever one has a proposal for each of them. Meanwhile, Allan remains sad about what he heard, and the divinity keeps torturing him psychologically. They all seem to act normally. He goes to the welcome party for the guests. Next, he meets with the Onis and starts thinking about the fact that they want freedom. We see the poor guy trying to pretend he is happy. At that moment, he comments that there is no problem in working and paying off their debts for freedom. And the least he could do for each of them is congratulate them for everything they have done. Having never been able to show his relaxed side, the guy decides to get drunk until someone calls him. Tina seems insecure about making her request. He soon notices that the paper in her hand is the contract between the two. The other two tricksters observe the situation, and the protagonist thinks they want him to talk about it. Then the fool puts himself in her shoes and remembers that he always rehearsed a venting session with his boss before leaving a job. However, Allan wants his subordinate to be quick, precisely to avoid hurting his heart too much. She gathers her courage and says she left only 1 coin as a debt, and that is her will and resolution. The guy doesn't understand anything that is happening. They all simply did the same thing. His surprise is truly genuine with all of this, so much so that the poor girl thinks her boss didn't like it. They now have a very small debt. It turns out that the protagonist recognizes that they could all pay him instantly since it is such a low amount. Although it is still a very low sum, the debt will still exist anyway. In other words, the employment relationship between them will continue, but they will all be free, and the spiritual contract in which he supports them will remain in place. At that moment, Sylphie confirms his theory. Knowing that his secretary planned all of this surprises him. She acknowledges that her master is doing great. Everyone there likes him so much that they didn't pay their debts just to stay by his side. So much so that they chose to continue as his servants. In other words, everyone there are comrades who share the same dream. Their desire is to continue following his worldview, because the goal of the servants is to stay by his side forever. Kyubi notes that besides having gathered various races, the protagonist also cured a mysterious illness. In this, the fox comments that maybe it's time to seek his help. Later, Allan and the goddess reflect on the situation of the debts, and she wants to know what happens when the debt reaches 1 coin. But he looks at his rival seriously, and she claims that they can end his race. In other words, the guy feels trapped and at their mercy, and the deity thinks it's a good idea to keep him in line. And even so, the clever one seems to have an idea up his sleeve. His trick is ready to be used when necessary. A cup holds his contingency, since his position now is worth almost nothing. The ones who moved there, except for the muscle-bound one, are students who will be paid for cultivating rice. The crazy guy's idea is simply to produce a lot of sake, because the madman wants everyone to give in to carnal desires, and the entity becomes even more disappointed. The rice cultivation will soon begin. To water the plants, they will use water magic. They all soon notice that his face looks stranger than usual, but the women realize it's just his strange smile, and Rin wonders if she'll ever get used to it. Earth magic prepares the soil for planting. Water sorcery waters each seed, and sword skills help in the rice harvest. As always, Allan did absolutely nothing, because his infinite tool is useless compared to Earth's spells. Still, the protagonist decides to act and tells the muscle-bound one to polish the grains. She obeys his order immediately. Her job is to assist in the milling for sake production. Not to mention that Raj shows up to help them. The arachnid brought a vaporizer to heat the rice and make it absorb moisture. In this, the cook explains that the outer part should be firm and the inside soft. But Ku has a question. She remembers that even in the imperial capital, rice is not sold. Yet even the ones who have been cultivating it for centuries don't have that much knowledge about it. Now, the reincarnated one is unsure of how to respond to her and recalls all his studies on the subject. Then the unbearable one appears to tease him about his reflection, which skipped the Eki part during his memories. Telling the annoying one not to disturb him, the creator remembers that they are both very close to something, because the sly one warns that he will soon retaliate against her annoyances. Just to mischievously challenge him to show his trump card at any moment, she comments that she will be the only one to prepare the ice crusher. But none of that crossed his mind. He is called back to the real world and soon leaves this discussion with the celestial being. As his thoughts are a mess, the fool doesn't know how to deal with it. Someone reminds him that none of this is important, as all that matters is the fact that he is their master. It's Sylphie who reminds him of the fact that they chose to follow him. Hearing the veteran, the warrior apologizes, and the protagonist is saved by the bell. The fact that she made Ku back down was quite impressive. It turns out that Rin still wants to know, however. The muscle-bound one reminds her that if the elf has determined something, it's the end of the matter. After all, the manager is the mind behind the debt plan of one coin, and the strategist can take down Allan whenever she wants. In other words, one should not attempt anything against the mafia boss. Then the clever one decides to continue being useless just to maintain his current lifestyle. Noel helps in processing the rice. The other allies also assist in adjusting the temperature. He explains how he used his skills to manipulate the grains inside the tank, and Ellie provides the necessary water for preparation. The ingredients are soon mixed, and the final adjustments will be made with magic. The issue is that this is a step that requires a lot of experience and intuition. But the Onis do not back down and make sure to take care of it because their race is also good at preparing this. He suggests that everyone try it when it's finished. They all immediately accept this proposal. Their responses even move him. Sometime later, the banquet begins. Thus, they all taste the sake. The girls savor the new drink. Each one of them is amazed by the flavor, and Allan is happy to see that his plan worked. And the cook starts waking up. The drinking made him fall asleep out of nowhere. Something seems to surprise him immediately upon opening his eyes, because Sylphie is sleeping next to him. Seeing her there leaves him completely shocked. After all, the guy doesn't remember what happened. What scares him the most is the fact that she is waking up. At this point, his secretary finally awakens. She looks at him and comments that her boss has finally woken up. At this moment, the chef doesn't understand anything, because his body seems to have shrunk. The goddess decides to show what happened before he rejuvenated. We see the infatuated one tasting the drink and feeling her body warm up. So much so that she remembers that sake can change people. Then the manager remembers that she needs to be careful with that. Out of nowhere, the dark-haired guy lies down on her lap. He finds her soft and fragrant. Then the elf notices what drunkenness can cause and that even restoration can't save him from it. They all served him several times, and his tolerance for alcohol is very low. She quickly realizes that her boss will die of embarrassment when he sobers up. Now the boy confesses his love for his right-hand woman, who looks visibly happy to hear him say that. Then the girl can't resist and hugs him. Something seems to happen out of nowhere. They all notice that their master has shrunk. At that moment, the maiden disguises it and says she is just protecting his reputation, because even she doesn't know why she did that. It all ends up being the fault of them being drunk. Tina wonders if doing something like this is right. This event makes her very worried to the point of dropping the bottle on the floor, just for Noel to quickly reconstruct it. Someone is impressed by her feat. It's Allan, who is amazed by her spell. Seeing him like this and hearing those words makes the little one blush. Then the dwarf takes the opportunity to impress him with her powers. She invites him to her room to show him more things. This comment makes her rivals uncomfortable. The three of them argue to see who will stay by his side. Of course, Aura takes the opportunity to grab him. So the boy comments that her airbags are very soft. Her suggestion is for the little brother to use her as a pillow. What prevents this is the other elf, who doesn't like that at all. Even Raya offers to take care of the little one. The fact that she and the spider sleep in a web impresses him. So much so that the clever one wants to try lying down with them. This response makes her very happy. happy. At that moment, the arachnid starts to run away with the little one. A pressure from the wind magic paralyzes her out of nowhere. Several elves position themselves to stop her. Ku observes all this confusion happening. Although little Allan is cute, she doesn't know how to take care of him. Someone soon calls her. It's the little master who compliments her hair and assures her that the clothes from his country would look great on her. And the rascal asks if the big girl would wear those clothes for him. This question leaves her completely embarrassed. Next, upon hearing him, the swordswoman confirms, and a lot of ketchup comes out of her nose. Rin finds it strange that her master is so shaken, and one of the maids explains that it's normal. Later, someone carries him to the room. The only thing that stopped their fight was the fact that he had fallen asleep. This event makes her take him back to his own room. The young boy wakes up and discovers that he is being put in bed, and then calls his friend to join him. No matter how much the manager tries to leave, the little brother insists on having her there. This leaves her completely shocked and unsure of what to do. Her desire is to sleep next to her. She ends up giving in to the little boy's pressure. Back in the present, the reincarnated one feels his cheeks soft. His companion soon appears to change his clothes, and he remembers nothing. Then the shy one decides to tell everything for his dignity. First, the girl takes off his clothes, and soon puts on a more childish outfit made by Raya. He is taken to see all his comrades, knowing that the others already know this shocks him. Each one wishes a good day to the village chief. So much so that they start to pamper him out of nowhere. It's clear that all the girls began to treat him with more delicacy. All this pampering makes the transmigrated one excited about his new harem life. Something still seems strange in his head. Each of them seems to discuss how to take care of him, to the point of even creating a pact about who will raise him. He believes this is a way to seal him. Besides, it's easy to extract information from him and solve problems by turning an unbearable person into someone adorable. The idiot believes it was a plan to ensure their job security, and he will remain in this form for 2 months. Of course, this news infuriates him. It happens that the rascal remembers that Shotas have permission to ask older people for undignified things. Everyone there hears this question. Each of the maidens agrees to carry him in their arms because they suddenly activated their maternal instincts, and of course this doesn't make him happy. Even the unbearable goddess offers to do this. The impression is that someone planned to turn him into a child, and his only choice is to work hard not to disappoint anyone, for his goal is to do everything possible to return to his original state while enjoying this life as their son. Someone opens the door out of nowhere. Seeing this leaves him amazed, and a mysterious woman appears out of nowhere.